Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto Kitsune Highschool DxD Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Kakashi. The top jonin of Konoha's shinobi corps had never been more guilt-stricken than he was at that moment. To him that was to be considered a lofty achievement. If the silver-haired man were to be honest with himself, he couldn't help but feel his whole life was marked with milestones, made from the graves of all those he loved. If he allowed his mind time to wander, it almost always dwelled on that fact. Dwelled on what he saw as a legacy of nothing but failure time and again. As it was, he felt more guilt-stricken with his most recent of milestones. He had once again failed Naruto. Over the last 12 years it seemed that was a recurring phrase in his mind. Sure, he could go on and place all his shortcomings toward the boy prior to this one at the feet of the Elder Council, or more specifically Danzo. He understood the elders and Danzo held no hatred for Naruto. In their own idiotic way, they each thought they were protecting the boy and Konoha both by how they handled the political nightmare that could have been the both boys' heritage and status being publicly known. Throughout Naruto's short life, Kakashi had been forbidden from adopting him as an infant, forbidden from acting as his caretaker, forbidden from adopting him once again when he was removed from the abusive environment of the orphanage. Forbidden from pledging himself and thereby the few remaining assets of the all but extinct Hotaki clan to the Uzumaki clan, which the civilian council also seemed to be trying to sweep under the rug, enraging the former ANBU captain even more. Despite all that though, all those failures, Kakashi had believed in the reassurance of Lord Third. The old Sarutobi had repeatedly consoled Kakashi when he was on the verge of snapping and telling how in the end it would all work out. Sarutobi had proven himself to a degree. He made sure that Kakashi was the head of Naruto's security detail when not absolutely required for out-of-village missions with his team. He had allowed him to leave gifts and help him whenever he could get away with it. It felt good too when Naruto had briefly mentioned in an idle conversation about one ANBU he liked above the rest who seemed to go the extra yard, while Sasuke and Sakura had been more interested in why Naruto seemed to have his own ANBU guard detail like Sasuke had at that age. Kakashi had basked in the warmth of knowing his small gifts had helped the boy he saw as his little brother. The old Hokage had also ensured Naruto was placed on his team despite the elders' argument that too many VIPs were placed together. Kakashi had hoped that he could finally truly bond with Naruto then, until Danzo personally met with him. What annoyed him the most was that in the end he had been persuaded by Danzo's argument. Sasuke was more of a flight risk, so therefore needed to be Kakashi's main focus. He was to make him love Konoha, shower the brat with as much support and training as possible. Who gave a damn if the little traitor in the making had earned it? Kakashi was to teach him even his own signature jutsu to give him a leg up in the exams. That reminded him of another of his worst moments. That betrayed and pained look in Naruto's bright blue eyes when he had asked for training for the upcoming exam finals and Kakashi had seemingly brushed him off to train Sasuke instead. That look as those sky blues darkened with surprisingly well-hidden emotion was nearly enough for him to grab a charge of insubordination and refuse the council and Lord Third's orders. Afterward he immediately went to the Third and all but begged him to help him find a solution. Again the old monkey came through by telling him about Jiraiya's presence at the hot springs. All it took was slipping that moron Ebisu the suggestion of training water walking at the hot springs and he just let Naruto's weirdly chivalrous personality lead him into confronting Jiraiya for peeping on the women there. Kid did not like perverts, it seemed. In Kakashi's humble opinion, Jiraiya deserved every bit of the beating he got from those women, Naruto alerted. Kakashi might respect Jiraiya for some things, but he would never forget how he all but abandoned Naruto to go gallivanting around the elemental nations rather than watching over the boy. The memories of seeing a sad and lonely Naruto fighting back tears in a cold and lonely apartment, or having to jump in to save him from yet another beating from bigoted villagers had long burned the bridge of Kakashi ever liking Jiraiya as more than a strong shinobi and decent author. Though perhaps part of that anger stemmed from Kakashi himself having no legal right to step in as Naruto's guardian. If he had been less of a fool as a child and not refused Minato-sensei's offer of adoption out of pride, he would have legally been Naruto's older brother and could have actually stepped in. Now though, it was far too late to make up for those old failures. The last moments of seeing Naruto would forever be carved into his mind's eye thanks to the Sharingan. He could see him as if he was still in front of him. The pale, bloody, and limp body that was Naruto Uzumaki, his student in charge, his brother in all but blood being lifted up by a masked stranger dressed clearly as a member of the Akatsuki. It was obvious there had been a previous fight when Kakashi arrived to the Valley of the End. Kakashi had known things would be grim the moment he left Konoha after his two subordinates, and the other Konoha shinobi. Sasuke had defected and Naruto along with several of his peers had been in pursuit. Kakashi made contact with the various young shinobi one by one. It was obvious the fight had been a running battle. For each one of the enemy defeated one of the young Konoha shinobi had been forced to remain behind, unable to catch up due to injuries. 2 of them had been in critical condition when retrieved by medical need, and another 2 would be in the hospital for a while still. The least injured was Shikamaru Nara, the team leader, with a simple broken finger. Despite that, he still had extreme chakra exhaustion and without proper supplements would have also died. With him being the least wounded of the team, it hadn't looked bright for the squad. Upon arrival at the last battlefield, the one between Naruto and his formerly closest friend and comrade turned traitor, Kakashi had briefly frozen up. He hadn't been afraid, at least not for himself. However, the amount of chakra expended in the area and the sheer darkness of it set the hairs on the back of his neck on end in worry for what had happened to his students. When he actually saw Naruto, he had immediately set into action. Using a sealing scroll, he had unsealed a medical kit and moved to help the blonde, noticing the slashed headband nearby that no doubt had belonged to Sasuke, signifying his status as breaking his vows to the village. Before he could even reach the boy, however, he was forced into leaping backward to bring up a kunai in defense, as his opponent seemed to simply appear before him in a swirl of the air. He had never seen anything like it. However, the robes the man wore immediately identified him as an enemy. As if Naruto hadn't gone through enough that day with Sasuke's betrayal and his attempted murder. Now the gang of criminals that had been hunting Kakashi's student for the beast sealed within him at birth had again come to collect their quarry. The Jonin moved in less than an instant, and was stabbing his drawn blade through the man's heart with a single quick strike. At least he would have been, except his arm seemed to pass right through his enemy's chest as if they weren't even there. The shock was enough for Kakashi to pulse his chakra to try and dispel any illusion he was under before realizing he wasn't under one. Intangibility was a truly terrifying ability to possess. Speeding up his attacks, believing that perhaps he could strike his unknown enemy before he activated his ability each time Kakashi failed to land a single blow. Still faster and faster he attacked, grunting and howling with determination, while his opponent seemed to stare boredly at him, as if taunting him. It was infuriating. The Jonin hadn't been so angry and frustrated since he found out Orochimaru had attacked his team in the Chunin exams and he couldn't help them. He knew that if he couldn't stop the man, he would take Naruto, and Jiraiya had told him of the Akatsuki, of their plans to rip the burden from each of the Jinchuriki, killing them in the process in the most agonizing way. The Toad Sannin had told him of a couple of other Jinchuriki that had suffered the same fate, and the ritual was evidently nothing but pure pain for the victim and carried on for days on end. Lasting longer the more powerful the Jinchuriki's sealed beast was. Naruto carried the most powerful of all of them. He refused to let the man take him away. Still, the man in the swirling mask took the boy anyway. All Kakashi had been able to do in the end was scream in frustration and rage. That and try an experimental jutsu. He noticed the similarity between the man's teleporting ability and his own recently discovered Kamui rather easily. He had hoped that they would somehow cancel one another or destabilize the warp and force his enemy to remain and distract him long enough for Kakashi to grab Naruto and make a break for it. Instead, it only seemed to propel the pair through the closing portal faster. The veteran ninja kicked himself for that. He should have known better. How stupid to use an untested jutsu in battle. With such high stakes as well. The amount of times he had lectured his team on that very same point whispered in his head as he slowly made his way back to Konoha, not even bothering to search for Sasuke further. Now, a week since the incident at the Valley of the End, and for the first time since his father's suicide when he was 5, Kakashi entered his father's office and stared at the same blade the elder Hatake had used to take his own life. The last week had taken its toll on Kakashi. He was drunk and on the verge of losing it. His final student, with Naruto missing and Sasuke considered dead to him, Sakura was the only thing keeping him from the brink. The girl had once been a total brat, even more than Naruto could be. Still, she had grown over the last several months on Team 7, and towards the end had been the one to comfort the boys when they were suffering from something. Especially Naruto. The two had initially had a poor relationship. Naruto had a crush on the girl and she had considered his interest annoying at best. By the time Sasuke had turned on the village, though, the pair had been like siblings. He had seen it when he told her about what happened to Naruto and Sasuke. He half expected her to fly to the defense of her precious Sasuke-kun, who she had pined after for as long as he could remember. Instead, she wept for the boy who had become her closest friend over the last year. He had been forced to comfort her, as she spewed her guilt at not treating Naruto as kindly as she should have. More surprising had been her sudden distaste for all things Uchiha, let alone Sasuke. Sure, there was still a conflicted emotion there. She had truly loved the boy, above even herself, despite how unhealthy her infatuation was. In the end, though, she knew that it was Naruto who had gone from being the dead last loudmouth she once knew to arguably her best friend. On their missions together, it had been Naruto after all, not Sasuke, that comforted her when she made her first kill. It had been Naruto that had insisted on the burying of even their fallen enemies when possible, much to her approval. It had been Naruto she watched win the hearts and minds of people from snow country to the land of waves. Kakashi's first lesson to Team 7 had been simple. Those who abandoned the mission were trash, those who abandoned their comrades were worse than that. Sasuke was thus lower than trash, and because of him Naruto looked to be dead. If that was the case, Sakura had confided in Kakashi that she didn't know if she could forgive him, and Kakashi had quickly learned the rest of their comrades, especially the other boys from the failed Uchiha retrieval mission, shared that sentiment. Albeit to a much more vengeful and violent degree. It seemed Naruto had earned some truly loyal comrades without even realizing it. So now several shinobi, most notably the silver and pink-haired teammates of Naruto, were anguished, wondering if the boy had truly perished, and if not, was he at least safe. They had no idea how much better his life seemed to be getting. Naruto. He always hated this place. His own mind. Was it okay to hate your own mind? Maybe that was unhealthy. Tsunade would know, Sakura might know as well. Ino would probably be the best person to ask, being as her clan dealt with mind-based jutsu so often. Either way, healthy or not, he hated the mindscape he found himself in. He had learned at some point, he wasn't sure from where, probably from Ino actually, just listening to her talk, that a person's mindscape was influenced by their life. It was how they saw their world without being hidden behind the lies they tell themselves and others. In that train of thought, it seemed fitting that once in his mindscape he found himself within a world drowned in dark, dank, ankle-deep water with aged and cracked black and gray walls made to look like some sort of sewer or desolate labyrinth. He didn't really understand why there were so many paths, he only ever followed the one path. The one that led him to his prisoner. The great and terrible Kyuubi Kitsune. The fearsome nine-tailed fox demon that had made his life a living hell for most of its short length. About time, Runt, I have desired to speak with you for a while now. Your continued resistance to meet with me, while unconscious, annoys me. The growling voice reverberated through the hall. I was unconscious. Why would I want to visit you anyway, Fox? Naruto growled back, surprisingly unafraid of the towering beast before him. TCH, as bold and annoying as always. Just like your mother, the demon said, with a devious smirk hidden behind his feral looks as he began his manipulation of the boy. Honestly, the fools of the Runt's village had made the path easy for him by hiding not only the identity of his parents, but his status as a container, and his true status as a clan heir from him. He would be using all of that to his own advantage. Oh, just shut up, you stupid mother? What the hell do you mean, mother? How do you know my mother? Naruto was pressed to the bars, not afraid of the massive claws that his tenant could gleefully use to rip him apart with. It was an expected reaction. Naruto had been alone for his entire life. The closest thing he had to a mother was the 5th Hokage Tsunade Senju, and he had only known her a few short months, most of which he had spent on missions or training. The Kyuubi knew precisely what he was doing by dropping that he knew his mother into the conversation. Now that he had done it, the Kitsune was actually a little ashamed of it. Not trying to manipulate Naruto, of course, that was a given, it was the fact that it was too easy. Perhaps if the boy's instructors at the academy hadn't purposefully undercut him, or that horrid hag of a matron at the orphanage hadn't simply beaten him every time he tried to play with the other children his age, Naruto might have caught on to his manipulation. However, thanks to his severely hampered social understanding, the fact of the situation soared over the desperate blonde's head, just like it had when Mizuki had manipulated him roughly a year prior. Kyuubi was even a little put off with the display. He knew the topic would set his jailer off. However, to react in such a strong manner sent a shockwave through the mindscape that unintentionally activated the siphoning of portion of chakra as the boy unknowingly drew on it. In that brief instant, he felt all of Naruto's emotions centered on the matter. The pure heart-wrenching desperation was enough to briefly surprise even one such as the Kyuubi. More than that, though, it alarmed him to the possibilities of what could happen to him and prove what he had thought was occurring to his prison's body. The seal the brat's father had placed on him had been made to facilitate the Kyuubi's chakra overflowing into the boy whenever he needed it, but this was different. It had been ripped away from the Kitsune forcefully. Violently even. Never before had something like that happened except when the damned Uzumaki had used their chains on him to subdue him, or that bastard first Hokage had utilized his Kekkai Genkai to do the same. In the past he had pushed his chakra out to influence his vessel and weaken the seal, but now it was as if the seal had come for him. In truth, not even Kushina and Mito's seals had been able to do that. Only when in battle with the red-haired witches and bound with their chains had that happened. Once sealed within them, using his chakra had been difficult for them, and even when able had negatively affected their bodies. Kushina had looked as though she had been dunked in boiling water after using his potent chakra. That just further solidified his thoughts on the changes that had happened when they entered this place. Boy, focus, I will tell you of her in time. Even though I despise her memory, I'm not such a monster as you think I am. For now you need to learn about what happened since that accursed Uchiha caused you to fall unconscious after that final blow to your chest. Naruto seemed to calm down at the growling tone of the nine-tailed beast. Fine, But I'm going to hold you to that, QB. Again, the QB was a little surprised by the actions of his jailer. Usually it wouldn't be till the next time that they met that he would be able to discuss what he wanted. Kushina had been the same way. At least Mito had some proper respect for him. Do not make demands of me, runt. Now shut your disgusting human mouth and listen. He inwardly smirked as Naruto seethed below him. It gave him extra amusement to know how important his precious smile was to his jailer. He worried over his dental hygiene like a woman worried over their hair. Though the fox begrudgingly admitted that the dazzling smile the boy had seemed worth it. You have been unconscious for a week. What's worse is many things have changed around us in your time asleep. The first is that you very nearly died. Don't hurry and thank me or anything. The Uchiha has tried to kill you, as I always knew he eventually would. What do you take from that whelp? QB studied Naruto as he watched emotions run through the boy's bright blue eyes. Just like his father and mother, he could hide his emotions with his mask of a happy idiot, perhaps even better than his parents could, but his eyes always told his secrets. They always told the truth of what he was actually feeling. Be grateful, brat. Had you not deflected the Chidori strikes meant for your heart, and had I not chosen to heal you, you would have long since died. Had that red-eyed brat hit what he was aiming for, not even I or that blonde bimbo you call a Hokage could have saved you in time. The boy snarled up at QB for the insult towards Tsunade, but largely managed to keep his calm. Sadly for you, when that scarecrow you call sensei came to get you, another arrived as well. A member of the Akatsuki, I presume. QB knew full well who it was. Well, that is to say, he had encountered him before when he had ripped him from Kushina's seal and took control of his mind to set him on Konoha. A man masquerading as Madara Uchiha. While the two were in fact similar, Madara's chakra was far darker and more vile than the man who had kidnapped Naruto. QB, where are we? Are we at the Akatsuki base? Are they about to kill us? What's going on? We have to wake up now. We have to escape. We can't stay here. QB rolled his eyes as Naruto began pacing while motioning frantically with his hands in front of his cage. Shut up, runt, and sit down. You're insufferable. He roared, shaking the bars of his cage as he did. No. You shut up. How are you not worried right now? The Akatsuki are hunting me because of you, you know. This is your fault. Naruto roared back, again somewhat surprising the massive fox with his tenacity. Surprise quickly turned to rage after that. My fault? You thankless little ant. I keep you alive and this is your thanks to me? QB slammed his hands into the bars separating the two and roared at his container. Shut up. You and I both know you only heal me because you don't want to risk dying because of the seal put on me. Pervy Sage told me all about it. He told me how this seal was different, and that normally when a tailed beast dies they reform in a few years. But that my seal was crafted by the fourth Hokage with help from the god of death himself at the cost of his own soul, and that if I die I might just drag you along with me. The fact that you are suddenly so mortal terrifies you. So stop with the kind act, we both know you are anything but. Naruto screamed back. Yet again QB was a little shocked by the boy, though this time it was more due to the well-thought-out rebuttal that the boy had. He had always known Naruto was more intelligent than he let be known. Always playing the fool to better hide behind his mask and protect himself from abuse. It hurt him to be ridiculed constantly, but it hurt a lot less than beatings for being seen as the demon regaining its strength. Still, though the boy was a primarily foolish child, there was little of the world he truly knew of, especially when it came to things his own village hid from him. It seemed perhaps this chain of events was forcing the boy to mature slightly and come out of his self-imposed shell. He was still too emotional because of the situation, though. Trying to come to terms with his best friend attempting to murder him, stabbing him in the back metaphorically and in the chest literally. The fact that QB somehow knew his mother, that he nearly died, and that he was taken by the Akatsuki. Perhaps a different approach would yield better results for their current conversation and get things back on track. Kid, you need to calm down and listen to me. He growled out more softly than ever before. Leaning down to peer at Naruto closely, he pressed his face to the bars of his cage. The massive ruby orb QB had for an eye was as large as Naruto was tall. The blonde glared up at QB, and for a brief moment the fox could nearly see his mother. He internally chuckled at the thought. He might have his father's blonde hair and bright blue eyes, however his face, eye shape, and attitude was all Kushina Uzumaki, and as much as he hated being sealed away, he couldn't bring himself to hate his vessels, not fully. None but Mito had willingly had them sealed in them, and Kushina had even altered her seal to allow him to share in her senses when he wished, experiencing glimpses of the outside world again. That was something Minato had worked into the seal when he had crafted it all those years ago. What's with the new name? Naruto asked, having calmed down enough to cross his arms and scowl at the giant-tailed beast before him. For a fox, a child is a kit. QB sighed. That name is more fitting than ever before. I will come back to that later. For now, though, let me tell you this. We are no longer held prisoner by the Akatsuki. Someone, or rather something, has rescued us. Kyubi explained, and Naruto let out a relieved sigh before slumping to the damp ground. However, there are a few issues. We are not in Konoha. Actually, we are in a whole new dimension than before. Whenever the man who took us was fleeing, your teacher tried to capture him using some odd jutsu. The two created some sort of distortion that caused us to wind up here. The people that saw a grown man in a suspicious mask carrying a severely injured child around by his throat immediately attacked him and sent him jumping back into our world, leaving us behind. We are now stuck here, likely for good. Kyubi watched the dread fill the boy's eyes, and a small part of him, an infinitely tiny fraction of his being, felt sympathy for the child that had everything taken from him time and again at every point in his short life. That's not even all, so listen. The Kyubi got his attention one more time. This world's humans cannot use chakra, however another group of beings here can. For whatever reason, whether because of my chakra flowing into you to try and heal you, or simply because of our connection, you have been made to more closely resemble those beings. What I am saying is welcome to the Kitsune clan. You are now a nine-tailed fox like me. Kyubi nearly laughed when the boy's expression turned blank. He stood still as a statue, trying to work through everything in his head. Well, Kyubi thought. That's his breaking point, it seems. A few too many changes at once. I can't wait until he realizes the ones caring for him aren't human either and aren't chakra users either. This will be an enjoyable few days. Get yourself together, kid, you are beginning to wake up. Be sure to thank these nice people for saving your worthless life. If only they knew the headache they would get from doing that, maybe they would have let the Akatsuki keep you. Kyubi faded into the darkness of his cell. You always have to have the last laugh, don't you, fox bastard? Naruto grumbled as he snapped out of his funk. You are a fox bastard now too, kid. The Kyubi laughed from within the darkness of his cell. Actually laughed, well, more of a chuckle, but still Naruto had never heard him do anything but snarl, roar, and growl. Bastard. Rias. The crimson-haired ruined princess would be considered by most to be above watching over and caring for a boy that had more or less shown up on her family's doorstep out of thin air. In actuality, though, the Gremory clan were renowned for their kindness, compassion, and loving attitudes. That and something seemed to draw her to the younger teen. He was around Kaniko's age, maybe a little older or younger, though it was hard to tell. He seemed muscular but thin and lean, so telling what age he was at the start of puberty was impossible for her. The last week had been rather stressful. The brief fight in her family garden between her brother, father, mother, and sister-in-law, and a strange masked man in a black and red cloak had seen the strange man that had been dragging the blonde boy before her around, sent packing back into whatever odd portal he used. Surzex had told her it was likely he had accidentally teleported into the garden while trying to take the boy with him. Her elder brother was usually right on these sorts of things. Whenever he dropped his facade of a carefree goofball and returned to the serious nature of the man who had earned his position as the de facto leader of the four Satans of the underworld. He really seemed to possess an inquisitive mind, the likes of which were typically reserved for comic book characters and cheap mystery novels. Rias still remembered seeing the horrible injuries the boy had when the masked man dropped him on the ground. Gaping holes in his chest and shoulder, a myriad of darkening bruises, broken bones, and smaller cuts and gashes. He looked like he had been tortured. She was nearly sick seeing the damage done to him. Grafia had acted quickly and raced off with him to care for his wounds. She had later told Rias that he seemed to possess a powerful healing factor and would have possibly survived even without her help, though it would have taken much longer to recover. That was impressive in its own right. Rias had never seen someone recover from such injuries without magic or the bloodline of the Phoenix clan. Still, though, when Grafia, Surzex, and her parents had briefly glanced into his memories to try and figure out where he belonged, they all seemed to become extremely uncomfortable. Surzex in particular seemed to be especially agitated and close to anger over something, but she couldn't honestly tell what specifically. They then told her about some of the things that they had learned. She could tell they were keeping things back, not really what it was, but that there seemed to be much they kept back. At least Rias had learned his name. Naruto Uzumaki. They said he used chakra, which seemed obvious to her. He had 9 tails and fox ears, didn't he? It was obvious he was a kitsune yokai. However, they wouldn't tell her much more than that. They also wouldn't let her be in the room alone with him. She either had to have her entire peerage with her, or at least one of Surzex's peerage or her parents with her when she was there. At this moment her peerage was with her. They seemed almost as interested in the strange boy as she was. Kaniko had shown more emotion in the last 7 days than she had gotten out of her in the last 5 years. Perhaps that was expected, though. Both were yokai after all, and both seemed to be hunted, likely due to that fact. Rias knew the most coveted peerage members were those that held sacred gears or were young yokai. As much good as the peerage system did in replenishing the numbers of the devils, it still was a system that could be easily abused. She wouldn't be surprised if someone had attempted to kidnap and sell Naruto to a high-class devil for a hefty sum. Naruto would likely gain a large amount too. Nine-tailed kitsune were extremely rare, nearly as rare as the Nikosho-like Kaneko. That thought briefly sparked anger within her. Kaneko had become much like a little sister figure in her mind since they met, and the thought about Kaneko going through that enraged her. Thankfully, while a passionate person, she wasn't a slave to her emotions. Turning her thoughts forcibly to better things, she couldn't help but chuckle at the sleeping duo before her. Kaneko had mentioned Naruto's chakra was very warm and protective, and had simply crawled up close to him before contentedly dozing off beside him like they were lifetime friends. The girl had even relaxed to the point to reveal her cat-like yokai features as she slept. Rias had to fight the urge to squeal in delight at the cute scene of the two small yokai sleeping side by side. She didn't want to wake them up. It didn't help that Akino had found the pair purred in their sleep when you pet their ears. Rias had to bite her knuckle to keep herself from waking the pair up, her girlish squeal of joy replaced with small quiet squeaks as she looked out how adorable they were. Even Kiba chuckled at the scene. Today the four of them had gathered together. Rias had been talking to each of them. She told them she intended to make Naruto a member of her peerage like they were. Kaneko immediately agreed. She said his chakra was warm but didn't elaborate as to what that actually meant. Kiba and Akino were a little more on the fence. Kiba felt that perhaps it would be better to get to know the boy first. The adults had seemed a little distraught over something when looking through his memories, and had them only interact with the sleeping yokai when an adult was nearby or they were all together. Despite Rias' mother Venalina saying everything was fine, the precautions being taken still sent up red flags for the young knight. Akino had largely been won over by Rias and Kaneko. Not to mention the adorable image of the rook interacting with the boy made her want to squeal nearly as much as Rias. Still, as Rias' queen and right hand of her peerage, she had to think of the safety of Rias first and foremost. If Naruto turned out to be a threat, she would fry him with her lightning without thinking twice about it. So the scene that the blonde fox yokai awoke to was not what he expected. Sure, Kyubi had said that people had been caring for him, however he expected to wake up in some kind of hospital room, not an ornate bedroom with an exceptionally cute girl with cat ears on his left side, a beautiful crimson-haired girl sitting beside the bed, and an equally beautiful ravenette sitting at a small table along the wall playing a board game with a very handsome blonde boy. What the hell? These people were abnormally attractive. Where the hell was he exactly that the people looked like they were about to start a modeling career? Ignoring that thought, Naruto kept his breathing even and watched them for a few moments. The white-haired girl beside him was asleep. Why she was in bed with him confused him. The redhead seemed to be staring at them as well. It was a bit creepy. Maybe she was guarding them? The other two repeatedly glanced their way but focused on their game. Trying to think of what to do, he nearly turned his head when the door suddenly opened and a pair of red-headed men and two women, one a brunette, and the other looking as though she could be Kakashi's much more attractive sister. Seriously, these people all looked like they were inhuman with their flawless appearances. What the hell was going on? You can stop pretending now, Naruto-kun, the younger of the two red-headed men said calmly while smiling at him. That caused a bit of a surprise to pass through the younger group. The white-haired girl also woke up with the man's voice. What do you mean, Oni-sama? Rias asked Surzex as he told Naruto to stop pretending to sleep. Surely she would have noticed. Surzex and the others weren't even in the same room. I placed a seal on him that would alert us when he woke up, Surzex said, answering both Rias's asked and unasked question. The moment he regained consciousness, we came to meet with him. He smiled kindly at the blonde boy who now was sitting up and staring wide eyes at the man. At least until his eyes narrowed at the mention of him putting a seal on him somewhere. His hand shot to where they had seen that curious pouch earlier, and again his eyes widened before he sprung from the bed into the far wall, stumbling slightly when he landed. It seemed he had still yet to fully recover. Rias was about to approach him and try and calm him down when she saw him bite his thumb and drag it across his inner arm before snatching the kunai that appeared in a small poof of smoke. With that, his eyes hardened from bright blue pools to chilling icy daggers that flicked back and forth across the room, assessing the danger. It's all right, Naruto-kun, you don't need to be afraid, we are the ones who have been caring for you, Venalina said, trying her best to show him they meant no harm. Who are you and how do you know my name? No, first, where is the seal you placed on me? Naruto growled out quietly. Just calm down, Naruto, and we can explain. Surzex tried, but Naruto simply glared at him. Explain and I can calm down, now where is it? He fired back, causing Surzex to chuckle slightly at the boy throwing his words back like that while tapping the back of his neck. Shocking the room, a second Naruto appeared in a poof of smoke and moved behind the first before a faint glow appeared on the first neck and the second disappeared once again. Now answer my questions, Naruto said quietly, the growl gone but his defensive stance remaining. It struck some of them as odd to see a 12-year-old acting like a paranoid warrior, but the elder generation quickly overcame that, and Surzex took a tentative step forward. Alright, where to start? Surzex asked himself mostly. By now Rias had gathered her peerage and pulled back behind her parents and Grafia. My name, why do you know my name? Why can I only sense chakra from the girl with white hair? His eyes widened a bit with his second question, as it seemed that was mostly a question for himself than the group before him. Naruto-kun, when Grafia here healed you, we decided to try and figure out what had happened to cause you such terrible injuries. We looked at some of your memories. Naruto's eyes shot wide in fear at that. If they looked at his memories, then they knew everything, the truth about his tenant, his innermost thoughts, everything. He suddenly felt at more of a disadvantage than when he fought Gaara. His eyes seemed unfocused for a moment, as if his mind was briefly somewhere else before he refocused, and suddenly resealed the knife. That perked Surzek's interest as to what had just changed so suddenly. For the moment, though, he was just glad the ice chips the boy sported for eyes had softened back into their deep calm blues. The group watched as if with a mind of their own. His tail stopped twitching in agitation, and seemed to wrap protectively around Naruto's thin small frame. It looked almost as if he was trying to comfort himself, though the brief flicker of surprise in his eyes at the sight of the tails amused the reigning Lucifer. I am sorry I overreacted. Thank you for everything you have done for me. I don't have much, but if I can I will repay you however I can. A brief glint ran through Surzek's eyes as he glanced toward his sister and her peerage near the door of the room. I'm sure we will think of something, Naruto-kun. In the meantime, perhaps you would like a little bit of an explanation and introduction? It was rhetorical, but still Naruto nodded and smiled faintly as he offered him a chair. I'll start. I am Surzek's Lucifer, formerly Gremory. This is my wife Grafia Lucifuge. She is also the queen of my peerage. I know that term confuses you, but I will explain it in a moment. This is my father Xiaticus Gremory, patriarch of the Gremory clan, and my mother Venelina Gremory, formerly of the Bale clan. As you can probably guess, she is the matriarch of the Gremory. Surzex explained, gesturing to each one as he introduced them. Each of them greeted Naruto with a faint smile and head nod. Now, this here is my younger sister Rias Gremory. It would have been impossible to mistake which girl was Surzek's sister, as Rias looked much like a younger female version of him. The heiress to our family and clan, and this is her peerage. Her queen Akino Himejima. He gestured toward the overly developed Ravenet with purple eyes. Her knight, Kiba Yudo. He nodded to the blonde boy who bowed his head with a small friendly smile. And last but not least, Kaneko Tuju, her rook. He pointed to the white-haired girl who somehow no longer sported the cute white cat ears on her head. It's very nice to meet you all. So what now? He couldn't help but feel a bit uncomfortable. As much as he desired it, Naruto had little real social interaction to draw on in this situation. His closest situation would be with Team 7, and that usually consisted of Sakura talking non-stop, Kakashi pointedly ignoring them, and Sasuke responding in primarily grunts and scowls. Actually, perhaps it is best if you ate something. No doubt you are starving. I'm sure my parents and Grafia would be happy to guide you to the dining room. You wouldn't mind, would you all? Surzex asked the others. Grafia immediately nodded and walked over to Naruto and began guiding him away, with the elder Gremory generation following close behind. Oniai-sama, did you want to talk with us about something? I think we would like to stay near him to watch over him till he finishes recovering, Rias said, wanting to stay near the interesting blonde. Surzex looked at her and remained silent for a moment before a small smile appeared on his face. He tucked his hand into his pocket inside his suit jacket and withdrew a unique-looking rook piece from an apparent peerage set. The piece was obviously a rook, but it was also obviously a mutation piece, something that was rare, and usually only a single piece per set became a mutation. This specific piece twisted upward from its base, causing the column-like lines to twist around the piece. At the top of the piece, where the battlements would be instead, the piece sported pointed blade-like protrusions like miniaturized kunai in shape. Rias, summon your remaining rook piece. Blinking for a moment, Rias did as commanded and held up her ordinary rook piece for her brother. Rias, your birthday is coming up anyway, so as part of your gift I'm exchanging your rook for this one. He took her rook and exchanged the mutated piece for it. Instantly the two pieces changed colors as the new rook took on her crimson red. This rook is obviously a mutation piece, Rias. It is arguably one of the most potent pieces I have seen come off the line. Ajuka told me that due to its status it was worth more than twice a rook's usual pawn count, though even he is unsure of its true value. He did mention, however, that should someone that theoretically had a larger reserve of power than its bearer willfully agree to be reincarnated with it, that it could succeed in doing such a thing. This is a gift to you, Rias, an important one, so whether you use it today, tomorrow, or never is really up to you. Surzex stressed today and tomorrow when he spoke to such a degree that Rias' eyebrow began to twitch in annoyance, and Akino had to stifle her giggles at the embarrassing scene. As if it wasn't already obvious what he was trying to convey to her, Kiba even let loose a sheepish chuckle at the awkward scene while Kaniko's flat stare seemed to somehow become even flatter than she previously had. Thank you, Oniai-sama. I'll try to find someone worthy of it. I had thought more along the lines of a bishop, in all honesty, being as Kitsune yokai are known to use large amounts of magically or chakra-based abilities, so why a rook? Rias initially began with a bland tone before switching to one of confusion over her brother's choice in peace. Well, you will undoubtedly find that while our new friend has plenty of powerful abilities in regards to his chakra, he will undoubtedly fit best in the role of a rook. Trust me, he said with a mischievous grin at dangling information about her prospective peerage member before her. This, of course, caused her eyebrow to once again begin to twitch in annoyance. Very well, I'm sure you know best, she said through clenched teeth. She might be a very compassionate girl, but part of compassion was passion, and Rias was still a practical princess who did not like being denied learning things about something that captured her interest. Excellent, the Crimson Satan chirped. Now let's go join our guest in the dining room. What do you say? His mood had dropped all seriousness and returned to the usually overly happy manner Rias was used to when she had to deal with her brother. Naruto. Naruto had come to one very important conclusion that would either help or hinder his new future in this world. The food was delicious, which was a damn good thing considering Kyuubi had reminded him once again that the chances of his ever getting back home were between not a chance and not a chance in hell. Shaking that thought from his head, Naruto returned his focus on the delicious food. Sure, it was a fact that besides Ichiraka, Naruto rarely got decent hot meals. Though Tsunade back in Wave Country had made delicious food as well. He had never had something like this though. It was a regular feast. Foods he couldn't even imagine, dishes he couldn't get enough of. So shoving everything in his mind to the side for now, Naruto continued to dive in. It took several minutes before he realized he was being stared at. Upon that realization, he came to an abrupt stop and turned to look at the three that had led him into the room and gaggle of servants behind them, all blinking owlishly at what they had just witnessed. A boy his size putting away as much food as he had would have shocked anyone. What was more surprising though was the speed at which he had done that. Still, while his manners definitely needed work, he didn't make a mess. Didn't spill a drop. Cleaned each plate he had like it was his last. Having watched the way he ate, like he would never see food again, sent the motherly instinct of both Grafia and Venelina into overdrive as they recalled some of the memories they had seen from his childhood. Naruto-kun, is it all to your liking? Venelina asked, trying to break the staring contest between their group and the boy. Naruto swallowed the mouthful of chicken he had and wiped his mouth roughly with a napkin. His bright blue eyes seemed to sparkle with joy the whole time. It's delicious. Some of these things I've never even seen before, and it's all so delicious, and I've never been able to eat so much good food. Thank you, Venelina-sama. He blushed toward the end as he noticed the large stack of empty plates he had cleaned himself. I'm very glad you like it. Please eat till you are all full, okay? If it was possible, the bright smile and sparkling eyes he had flashed her way earlier doubled in intensity as he dove back in for more. With Naruto back to focusing on his meal, it was no real surprise that when Surzex, Rias, and her peerage entered, he missed them entirely. The new entries to the dining room came to a standstill in shock at the sight of the boy inhaling food on their arrival. So most of the dinner went on without much said. Zeoticus nearly began to try and teach Naruto some better mealtime etiquette before the sudden stomp on his foot by his wife told him to wait until another time. Venelina couldn't help but remember the innumerable nights she had seen in Naruto's memory where he had been forced to go to sleep with an aching stomach, still hungry from barely eating enough food to survive. It was expected that he would eat like it was his last meal. Perhaps subconsciously he thought it was. Eventually the awkward meal came to a close, not that Naruto himself had actually noticed the awkwardness so embedded in his feast that he failed to pay attention to anything else. Now once again drowsy, Rias and most of the other female devils couldn't help but swoon slightly at the adorable sight of the tired little kitsune fighting to stay awake. The boy was nearly falling from his chair as he began to nod off. Naruto-kun, I need you to wake up, we have some important things to discuss, Surzex said gently as he nudged the tired boy. Naruto rubbed the tiredness from his eyes and nodded to the devil when he was back to being fully aware. Surzex smiled again before raising an eyebrow with a questioning look toward Rias. After getting a nod to his silent question, he stepped back and allowed the girl to step forward. Naruto, I know you are probably confused a little bit with what's going on, but I thought that maybe you would like to join my family? With that, Naruto's attention narrowed to the red-headed girl before him. Fully awake in an instant. Your family? He asked, more than a little confused by what she was actually asking him about. However, 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind in that instant, and his voice came out too quiet for the majority of the room to even catch. Yes, you see, we are devils, and devils have a way of making others devils by binding them to themselves with these pieces. Rias explained as she summoned the unique rook piece into her hand and held it up for him to see. You would become a devil too, and technically be my servant, but you would be a part of my peerage, like a part of my family. You would live a really long time, thousands of years roughly, and you could be with us. I would do everything I can to take care of you and make sure you are happy, just like with Akino, Kiba, and Kaneko. Naruto was dumbstruck briefly by that. She was asking him to become one of them. To become a part of her family. Noon had ever said anything even remotely like that to him before. The closest was Konohamaru, and his friends calling him Big Brother. You should take the offer, Kit. There is no telling what the villagers would do to you even if you could get back to Konoha for not bringing that damned Uchiha. Naruto flinched slightly at the words of Kyuubi that filled his head. He ran his hand through his blonde hair with a sigh. But what if they are actually waiting for me back home, Kyuubi? I mean, Kakashi-sensei tried to stop me from being taken, right? Naruto responded to the fox in his mind. His small list of precious people from Konoha flitting through his head. Don't be a fool, the people of Konoha only see you as a weapon, and I will not have a member of the Kitsune clan, even one as unworthy as yourself, be used in such a way. The beast growled out. That thought hurt Naruto, but honestly he couldn't refute it. After all, hadn't that been awfully close to what Hokage Gigi had told him when he asked what he wanted to be the first time? Someone like you, Naruto, can never not be a shinobi of the village. I'm sorry, but you simply must become one. The old raspy voice rang out in his head, and Naruto bit his lip before clenching his eyes closed and taking a breath to clear his thoughts. Alright. I don't really think I can go home anyway, he said. At least not without being treated even more like dirt than the first time. He thought somberly. Rias smiled brightly and practically dragged him out of the room and toward another to perform the ritual. Naruto barely managed to get his feet under him so that her dragging him wasn't in the literal sense. Once they were in the small sitting room she had chosen to use, Rias made him lay back on one of the couches before she placed the rook piece over his chest. Internally, Kyuubi grinned broadly. With this, his new kit would be well on his way to becoming a power to be proud of. That thought caused the grin to slide off his face as a frustrated scowl graced his appearance instead. The odd new paternal feeling he seemed to have grown in regard to his jailer when the boy underwent his changes confused, worried, and annoyed him. Most of all, though, it intrigued him. He had never felt this way before. Even with how small the emotion seemed, it was still vibrant and new, and the fox was surprised by his own eagerness to further explore it. He had to wonder what exactly caused such a change. The easiest assumption had to do with the fact that the boy was now more closely tied to him than before. When Naruto had been in Kushina's womb, his chakra had influenced the boy just as his mother and father's had, leading to those whisker marks on his cheeks developing. Now, though he had golden tails and ears with the tips bleeding to red, a red that matched his own fur color precisely. It was almost as if their brief blending had made Naruto into his. Shaking off that, though, he decided to focus on the even newer changes occurring to his prison's body. The influx of power, small as it was compared to his own, caused the grin to return to his maw. The power was dark, though not evil, and like when they were brought to this world, Naruto's body changed slightly. He seemed to gain a second chakra network, except it didn't carry chakra and acted more like a simple reservoir of energy. He also seemed to now have wings. That was curious. The Kyuubi wondered idly what it would be like to fly, even if he would be experiencing it from inside his prison. Noticing the changes seemed to be finishing, Kyuubi lay his head back down and drifted off to sleep. Things had gotten better and more interesting for his container than ever before. Perhaps it was time for a new start with the boy. Then again, it was rather fun for the fox to rile the brat up and terrify him of his power by giving him nightmares of him losing control. Really, only time would eventually tell whether or not the boy would end up worth putting effort into guiding. If he was, the fox smirked at the possibilities in this new world. As they said, the sky was the limit, and now they could even fly, so honestly the sky had already fallen to the wayside. Tsunade. The picture on Tsunade's desk always seemed to follow her with its eyes. Drunk or sober, the boy seemed to look at only her. That was enough to usually make her scoff and go about her business, but in her weaker moments Tsunade couldn't help but lock gazes with the little blonde she had returned to Konoha for. No matter what some villagers believed or what even she had convinced herself of, the only reason she came back to this damned village had been him. Now 3 years later, she sat here staring at a photo of him that was already outdated when he went missing. It was frustrating that the only pictures that seemed to exist of him were either his registration photo, team picture, or the small handful of him enjoying time with the third Hokage. I wonder what he looks like now. Probably like a copy of Minato at that age, she thought with a somber chuckle. For the last 3 years Tsunade had put any and all effort she could spare into searching for Naruto. She had even gone so far as to announce his true heritage a year into the search to try and bolster the efforts of her shinobi looking for him. though she still couldn't tell if she was disgusted or happy that had actually worked for a time. The fervor they used to look for him after that was more akin to a pack of wolves hunting prey. Nothing stood in their way. Still, they had no clue where he was. The only relatively good news for the situation was the fact that Naruto was most assuredly not dead. He remained unfaded on the Toad Summoner's contract, meaning only that he was in fact still alive. Further backing that up was Rias inside man, with the Akatsuki relaying the knowledge that some newer member of the group, a previously unknown member named Toby, had led the attempted capture, and Kakashi's Kamui attack had somehow disrupted his teleport. When Toby had arrived at the Akatsuki headquarters in Rain Country, he had been badly injured, but the reports said the injuries looked more from combat than from a failed jutsu. That meant perhaps Naruto had been rescued by someone. Or had simply been captured by someone else. Either way, he was indeed alive somewhere. The trick was just finding where. Reverse summoning him hadn't worked, and that meant either some sort of barrier was preventing them, or he was so far that the chakra cost was simply too much to accomplish the task. That seemed ridiculous though, as the Elder Toads could summon to and from practically everywhere on the planet. They had played once with the idea of using Kakashi's Kamui to try and follow Naruto's path, however that was quickly scrapped when they discovered his Kamui appeared to be a one-way ticket at its current state. Until he mastered the ability, no one would be using Kakashi's Kamui for anything, and sadly that path was hitting a roadblock. She was thankfully pulled from her thoughts on the boy by a soft knock on her door before the door was shoved open and Shizen stumbled in with the three irate elders following in behind her. Regaining her balance, Shizen made her way around the desk to stand by Tsunade's side while straightening her disheveled clothing from the surprisingly rough old woman. "I'm sorry, Lady Tsunade, they refused to wait for me to notify you of their arrival," Shizen said with a glare toward the trio while being completely ignored. "It's fine, Shizen. What can I do for you honored elders today?" Tsunade asked with a sarcastic tone. Honestly, the elders weren't horrible. Well, Danzo was pretty horrible, but Hamura and Koharu were simply prone to overassert their opinions when Tsunade was making decisions. All three were well and truly loyal to the village. The only issue between herself and them was the conflicting definition of the village. For Koharu and Hamura, it was not too far departed from her own mentality. However, they were simply too jaded in their old age. Too willing to sacrifice the one for the many. That wasn't to say they were heartless, again simply too jaded. They should have been retired a decade ago, but their input was still needed from time to time, as annoying as they could be. Tsunade was a jaded individual herself. Naruto and Jiraiya had dragged her to the position of Hokage, practically kicking and screaming. She still held on to her grandfather and granduncle's ideals of treating the village like a family. Her sensei had been Hiruzen Sarutobi after all, and the man had reigned for so long as Hokage and kept to the ideal of the village as family for so long that entire generations had grown to adulthood seeing him as their own grandfather. In her own team's case, he had practically replaced their fathers as well. Danzo, lastly, was the paramount patriot. To him, Konoha was an unassailable ideal, one which had to be protected by any means necessary, no matter the sacrifices. Sadly, his way of thinking had a major flaw in that he was more than willing to sacrifice everyone in the village to protect the idea of the village over the people that composed it. His work with his root program, taking children and turning them into emotionless drones, or more fitting, broken minds capable of performing any action if ordered to by him or the Hokage. His foundation was supposed to be disbanded, but everyone in the room knew that was not the case. It was that reason why the three splits in ideology argued so often and so fervently. Thankfully, only Tsunade had final say in matters concerning the village, and while she took her advisor's words into account, she still did what she herself felt was best for the village as her role dictated. "Tsunade, we have still yet to receive your decision regarding our proposed plan of action," Koharu said with a tired sigh, knowing she was poking a bear. Tsunade's sudden flash of rage in her eyes confirmed that. "Oh? Which proposed plan would that be, Elder Yutane?" Tsunade asked with a decent amount of heat in her voice. "Come, Tsunade, surely you grow tired of this game of back and forth. You know as well as we do that with Naruto Uzumaki's passing, Hamura said, only to come up short at the sudden spike of killing intent. Don't let your emotions control you. You are a Hokage, not a bratty little girl. Act like it." Danzo sneered, almost completely unaffected by the overwhelming presence of the blonde woman nearby. After a few brief moments, Tsunade's killing intent withdrew, though her glare remained. Hamura sighed, both in relief and annoyance. "Tsunade, do you think we take pleasure in this situation? While I cannot say any of us were close to the boy, we did care for him. I remember when he was small and he would sit in Hiruzen's office to pass some of the time, and Koharu and I would be answering all sorts of questions about what it was like being a shinobi." Koharu smiled faintly. It was true, either her or Hamura had been particularly close to the boy like Hiruzen had, however they had cared. It was hard not to. If he hadn't been burdened as a Jinchuriki and his family had survived, she would have felt the need to pressure the boy's family into placing him into a different path for life. Shinobi were at the core mercenary killers, and the thought of one such as Naruto doing that filled even her old heart with a bit of dread. Still, Naruto was son of the most prolific shinobi and kunoichi in modern Konoha history, and heir to one of the greatest shinobi clans to have graced their world. On top of that, he was a Jinchuriki. In reality, there was never going to be a choice in the matter. Jinchuriki or not, he would have had to become a shinobi and rebuild his clan as was expected of one in his position. It doesn't matter now, what has happened, and as tragic a loss as it is, we must move on. It has been 3 years, and Konoha has taken too many hits to its image of superiority over the years. First the Kyuubi attack, then Orochimaru's invasion and Hiruzen's death, then the loss of not only the last Uchiha clan heir, but the village Jinchuriki and heir to the Yellow Flash and Red Death. We cannot afford these kind of impacts against us. The weaker we seem, the less missions we will pull and our economy will stagnate. It's imperative we reclaim our prestige. Danzo spoke with his usual monotone. What you three are suggesting could easily lead us into war. You know that, correct? One we might not win if we are seen as the aggressors. As it stands, our only allies are Suna, Kusa, and Taki, and your plan would turn Taki against us. Tsunade commented. Perhaps, but we must try. Besides, from the way it sounds, only the elders and village leader in Taki would defy us. The villagers treat their guardian worse than Konoha treated Naruto when he was here. It's to the point they have her living in a shack outside of their village's protection. From the sounds of it, the young head jonin of Taki would see our side of things if we simply pressed the point that it would be better for her to live here in Konoha. He is the girl's elder brother after all, half-siblings though they may be. It seems they are close to one another. Koharu replied. That got Tsunade to more begrudgingly support the idea. It would still be difficult to bargain with the leader of Taki, she knew that, but perhaps they were right. Pushing the point of giving the girl in question a better life in Konoha, where at least the illusion of obscurity would shield her from the ostracization and abuses of the public unlike in her home, seemed to be a better option. A myriad of conflicting thoughts and emotions ran through her mind at the concept before slowly she turned her attention back to the elders before her. If we do this, then the girl's burden must stay under wraps. I won't have them do to her what they did to Naruto, especially if our whole selling point is to save her from that treatment there. She relented with a sigh. Nodding, the three elders turned and left, leaving Tsunade with Shizen and the hidden Anbu as the only people remaining in the room. Turning to her apprentice, Tsunade was on the verge of tears but nibbled at her lip, looking at the girl she considered something between a younger sister and daughter. Perhaps they are right, Lady Tsunade. We can't find him and don't have any way to reach him if the worst-case scenario is true. It may be time to move on, Shizen said, biting back her own faint sob at the thought of never seeing the little blonde boy again. Perhaps, Swanda said almost in a whisper. Shizen, and you four, leave me. If I need you, I will signal. The group all left, Shizen calmly walking out and the Anbu simply disappearing in a flicker of movement. So Tsunade was left looking at the outdated photo of Naruto as she often was. Ku Academy was regarded as one of the premier educational institutions in Japan. It was a unique academy, playing host to grades from elementary to university ages. Its high standards and success rate of its alumni had led the academy to become one of the most well-respected schools not only in Japan but the world, and so it was from around the world that its student body came. That sort of image bred a slight feeling of arrogance, or at least a consciousness of the importance of image. So it was little surprise to most when the student body took that idea of one's image a step further and applied it to each other. In Ku Academy, appearance was imperative, and those that stood out the most were even given epithets to reflect such a thing. There were those on both ends of the spectrum, of course. Thankfully, the majority of those with the nicknames were well liked and respected. Arguably the highest on this totem pole was the two great ladies of Kuo, Rias Gremory and Akino Himejima. Both girls and boys adored them. Both boys and girls lusted after them. None ever approached them though, except for their own clique of other well-standing students. Kiba Yuto, the Prince of Kuo, was just as unapproachable as the two great ladies, though the majority of boys despised him largely out of jealousy, while he was universally adored by his female schoolmates. Then there was of course the youngest two of the group. Considered the mascots for Ko Academy. Kaneko Tuja for the girls and Naruto Uzumaki for the boys. Though Naruto had gained his own separate personal nicknames beyond that of school mascot. Most were a bit too on the nose for his liking though, and so Naruto punished those that gave him his nicknames rather regularly. His distaste for those nicknames was something his elders in the peerage loved to tease him with. Akino especially. Despite his embarrassment at the teasing, it had brought them closer. In fact, over the last 3 years Naruto's new family had become very tightly knit. While the Gremory clan had largely welcomed Naruto and considered him close since his arrival, by now he was truly regarded as family. While they had once considered him with pity for his circumstance, they now saw him as a boy who had worked hard to give as much help to the Gremory family, and Rias peerage especially, as he got in return. There was no denying the changes he had brought to the close-knit group. Whether it was bringing Kaneko out of her shell, if even only to a degree. Sparring with Kiba to strengthen them both and work out some of their pent-up rage at their pasts. Comforting Akino about her past once they had confided in each other. Even just keeping Rias' mind off her looming betrothal to a certain phoenix. He always went above and beyond for his new family. That being said, for as much as Naruto had become a true gentleman worthy of bearing the mark of the Gremory clan, he had a few glaring issues that placed undue stress on his king. That was of course his prankster nature. Especially when used for punishing anyone he felt deserved it at Ko. At first it hadn't been so bad. A few jokes and the like here and there around the Gremory estate. She had even had a few laughs at her brother's expense thanks to Naruto. It was when he entered high school though, and he met a certain trio it seemed to kick his need for pranks into overdrive. Much like there were those with monikers at the top of the social food chain at Ko, there were those at the bottom as well. Specifically 4 of them, the perverted trio and their female counterpart the perverted witch. These 4 students somehow made it onto Naruto's list without even needing to encounter one another. What Rias and the others didn't know was that Naruto had maybe been diverting some of his frustration at his absentee godfather from his childhood into the most similar individuals he had encountered. That, and whether the boy could understand the emotions behind it or not, he definitely disliked the way they looked at his friends in the peerage, and their sister peerage under Sona Citri. It was this pranking tendency of the young blonde toward his perverse upperclassman that had led Rias to her daily annoyance, forwarded to her via her old friend Sona. More paperwork. She really needed to curb the boy's creativity with some of these things. The bill for fixing the East Wing's first-floor bathrooms was far closer to the price of a brand-new luxury car than could be reasonably explained. Then again, seeing the 3 screaming perverts following the prank had been worth it. Almost anyway. Oh, hell, he's corrupting me. Rias sighed out with an exasperated smile. Corrupting you, you say? Why, Rias, you wouldn't happen to be having naughty thoughts about your cute little servant now, would you? A nearby Akino teased, causing the redhead to roll her eyes. I think I'll leave such debauchery to you, Akino. I will forever fear for my dear Naruto whenever you finally act on one of your horrifying fantasies. Well, him, Kiba, Kaneko, Gasper, Sona, Sona's peerage, and the majority of the school's population. You really should try and limit yourself a bit. The things you mumble in your sleep, Rias said with a false shiver at the end, getting a giggle from her closest friend. My, you are really playful today, Rias. What's on your mind? The Ravenet asked as she plopped down on the edge of the desk to more comfortably chat with Rias. In response, she just smiled before sliding a page over to Akino. As the other girl read through the report, Rias couldn't keep her smug grin off her face as she watched Akino's eyes slowly grow wider. When she finally turned her purple eyes back to her king and friend, she stammered briefly before Rias lost it and openly laughed at her friend's face. Yep, both in one try. I knew that they could do it. It's so exciting, Rias exclaimed with a smile. It's wonderful. Now with Kaneko and Kiba both mid-class like Naruto and I, the only one not promoted yet would be Gasper, Akino said. She was a bit stunned with how easily the Knight and Rook had passed the exam, but she knew they would in fact pass from the start. It just showed how much the peerage's extra training was paying off lately. Sadly, the joyous mood Rias had from learning of 2 of her peerage being promoted to mid-class dampened slightly at the mention of her troublesome bishop. All of her peerage members came with a selection of issues that affected them. All of them had suffered some form of abuse as a child, and all of them had also been nearly murdered by those abusers, or in Gasper and Kiba's case, successfully murdered by them. Thankfully, there remained a brief window of time following death that a devil could resurrect someone into their peerage. Some other high-class devils had taken to calling her peerage a band of rejects and misfits, which angered her more than her peerage for some reason. Gasper's past specifically had led to issues that kept him terrified of the world, only truly trusting Kaneko, which stung Rias's pride slightly, as she was the one who had rescued him. Not that that really mattered, but it did nag at her a bit. What worsened the situation was that Rias, for all intents and purposes, had a bleeding heart. She couldn't bring herself to force Gasper out when he both feared everything, and feared himself in interacting with everything. Closing himself off had been intended as a temporary solution after all. The damper had an extremely powerful sacred gear, but due to his trauma and his fear of himself, he lacked hardly any control in activating and deactivating his ability. The shivering mess the boy devolved into at the mere mention of social interaction was enough to cause Rias to lock up and worry over him herself. Seeing one of her peerage members in so much fear or pain hurt her nearly as much. A nudge from Akino, who watched her with a sad smile, brought Rias back to the present. There was no reason to dwell on that which couldn't be helped today after all. Worrying over something wouldn't suddenly fix it. I had Naruto send some clones to gather party supplies for when the others get back, Rias said as she turned back to her paperwork. The two girls were quiet for a while following that. Rias continued to work while Akino stared, first at her friend, then after a sigh, out the window to the well-kept school grounds. It really was a beautiful place to live. If she wanted, Akino knew both she and Rias could make their bodies remain at the age they looked now. Just old enough to be considered women, but young enough to also be considered girls. They might even do that, if it wasn't for the literal mountain of pressure weighing down her redhead friend's shoulders. Maybe a bit of good news could help alleviate that tension. Normally she would tell Naruto, and he would tell Rias, as the boy just had a sense of cheer about him that doubled the effect of good news and dampened the effect of the bad. Still, every bit could help, right? Before she left, Kaneko told me that she sensed a sacred gear among one of the perverted trio the other day. Smelled like smoke and lizards, so something to do with dragons. Akino spoke quietly. Rias stopped writing and stared at her work before glancing up at Akino with a faint amount of surprise on her face. Would it be worth it to have one of those boys in her peerage? They were annoying. As a devil, neither she nor Akino were really all that bothered by the boys' perverse natures. A great many devils were rather prolific sleazes. It came with the territory after all. That being said, the three boys took that nature to the extreme, to the point even she, a full-blooded devil woman, was annoyed and put off by their behavior. Oh, and that's not all, Akino said, this time with a coy grin on her face. Rias focused on her friend's face, shaking thoughts of the perverts from her mind for a moment. I sensed an overdeveloped reserve of magic from that Kiryu girl. The title perverted, which might be more on the nose than was intended. Akino's grin grew into her naturally enticing smirk, something that came with being born a fallen angel. Well, it seems Naruto will be busy doing what he does best over the next few weeks, Rias said with a chuckle as she turned back to her work. Akino, for her part, smiled at faintly, cheering her king up at the thought of new peerage members. Stepping out of the room and back to the kitchenette they had installed for their clubroom earlier in the year, Akino fought back the giggle when thinking of Naruto's reaction to being ordered to stalk the likes of the perverted trio for the next few weeks. As much progress as he had made to be a more mature gentleman under the tutelage of Venalina herself, he still had rather childish pouting moments that Akino found all too cute. Enough thought on that for now. What cake should I make for that party Rias wants to throw? Oh, better than cake. Cupcakes, Akino thought as she began one of her favorite and surprisingly less lewd hobbies. Ko. As usual, peace reigned in the town of Ko. Whether that fact could be attributed to being clearly claimed territory belonging directly to the Mao on lease from the yokai faction, the region being directly and actively governed by the younger sisters of two of those Mao, or the simple fact that Ko was simply a peaceful and friendly town naturally, didn't matter. What did matter was that despite all its peacefulness and seemingly quiet morning atmosphere, the occult research clubroom had fallen into utter chaos. Naruto cackled as he dove over the couch to avoid the swing of a frosting-covered Kaneko hot on his heels. On the other side of the room, the rest of the club laughed alongside him, having lost their sense of decency when Naruto had nailed her on the forehead with a congratulations cupcake for both her and Kiba's promotion to mid-class. With Kaneko tossing the couch out of the way like it weighed nothing, the smaller girl bared down on her fellow rook only to be surprised by his counterattack and pinned in a tight hug, while he rubbed his cheek against her own. Oh, Chibi, you are just too cute when you get all flustered like that, you know. If anything, the sudden sweet tone and hug made Kaneko even angrier. However, Naruto's nickname for her sent her over the edge. She was none too happy with the fact that somehow within the last 3 years Naruto had exploded in size, becoming the largest in the peerage while she remained by far the wasn't fair. When he initially joined them, Naruto had been the same size and age as she was. Now he was almost as tall as Kiba, and far more physically imposing than the thin knight. Mercy! Naruto yelped as she pinched him on the soft underside of his arms. They had played at this same game for the last 3 years, so despite her disadvantage in size, Kaneko had picked up a few tricks to even the odds. With a huff, the small teen stepped away and cleaned herself up as the rest of the peerage slowly regained control over their laughter. Naruto just pouted at his friend with fake teary eyes as he rubbed his arms. So damn mean, Chibi, just trying to show you my love. He teased lightly while the girl simply rolled her eyes, though she did faintly smile. While this has been entertaining, I think it's time we move on. Congratulations, Kiba and Kaneko, you both make me so proud. Rias broke in to move the party/meeting forward. She looked at her friends much like a big sister might when their younger sibling achieved something. Noticing the way Rias looked over her peerage, Naruto couldn't help but smile. While many devils use their peerages like tools or slaves, some even as nothing more than harems, Rias had instead made her peerage her family. Recently Naruto had been thinking on that fact quite a lot. Sometimes he missed those back in Konoha, but still, despite a part of him considering it selfish, he realized he had never been happier than when he was with Rias and the others. It was like he had always been looking for a home and finally found it. Tuning back into the conversation Rias was having with the others, he suddenly paled at the last few words. I'm sorry, can you say that again? Rias, Kaneko and I have to follow who? Naruto said while groaning slightly along with Kaneko. Neither of them were fond of what their king was asking of them. I thought I was clear. You and Kaneko will be following Issei Hayato and Aika Kiryu. I want you to follow Kiryu, she has a sizable magical reserve and may be a witch. We need to see if she has a coven nearby and if she would be willing to be recruited. You have decent sensing abilities, even if they aren't at mine or Akino's level you should be able to tell if she is part of a coven easily enough. Rias explained, though she had to fight to keep the smirk off her face. It was no secret that Aika Kiryu was essentially the female form of Issei Hayato. Perhaps worse, as while Issei kept himself to peeping, Aika was far more forward, and since the start of the year Aika had set her eyes on both Naruto and Kiba, rarely leaving the two boys alone during school hours. Aika had even helped their fangirl mobs a few times and Naruto was pretty sure she had stolen at least one pair of his underwear last month. The hints she left whenever she cornered him in the hallway seemed to confirm that. But Naruto began only for Rias to raise a thin eyebrow at him. No buts Naruto, I need this done, and despite being a rook you have the best stealth among our peerage. So it's up to you. I can't rely on anyone else for something so important. Rias said, a small pout on her face causing the poor blonde to fold instantly. What could he say? Rias had a special place in his heart, and it had nothing to do with her beauty and attractive way of convincing him. No, those just acted as the final nail in his metaphorical coffin. Oh, of course, Rias, no problem, he said with a sigh, getting a round of giggles from his friends after he rolled over. Except for Kaneko, who was in practically the same boat as him. Now then, with that out of the way, let's get back to more fun topics, like a tournament of Tekken Tag or something. This got Kaneko to immediately perk up. The girl was a bit of a gaming addict, and she especially liked fighting games. Kiba was less interested but wasn't one to turn down a round of playing games with his friends. With that, the group went back into their party mood for the rest of the night. Naruto and Kaneko both wishing it lasted a bit longer, as they dreaded beginning their new task the next day. It had been roughly a week since Naruto and Kaneko had begun stalking the two candidates for Rias peerage. Despite the abnormal amounts of perversion, neither of the two seemed all that intriguing. Excluding, of course, the reasons that had led to them following the pair to begin with. Naruto had easily found Aika's reserve of magic was noticeably stronger than any other humans in the area. While that could be written off as simply a higher chance for magic, hers was growing at a rate that only confirmed she was receiving training. It was no wonder Naruto hadn't noticed before. Akino, the girl's magic had likely only begun being trained within the last year or two, so it was still small enough to be missed without greater skill at sensing. What had Naruto most intrigued though were the various scents that seemed to dwell around the girl. Several other people, and the scent that various magical elements gave off. Something few realized was that most supernatural gifted with enhanced senses of smell could tell the slight difference between magically made elements and their naturally occurring counterparts. As it was, Aika definitely smelled of smoke from magically created fire. Not strongly though, so it was unlikely that she was the one using the fire spell that caused it. Tonight, though he could focus slightly on other things, Naruto and Kaneko had been called off of their task to a meeting with the rest of the peerage to report their findings, and to also deal with a stray that had come too close to Rias' territory. That was why they were moving on an old decrepit house in the poorer part of Ko now. After Rias and Akino placed a barrier around the area to keep things secret, they made their move on the house. Kaneko smashed open the door and Kiba and Naruto raced in to secure the front room, only to stop themselves and gag slightly at the smell of rotting corpses. How a stray devil could live here wallowing in that scent Naruto would never know. Part of him even concluded that for them to be so far gone as to enjoy that smell meant that death would likely be a mercy at the peerage's hands. Stray devil Vele, formerly of the Albus Paimon peerage, surrender now and face the court of the Mao or be destroyed. Rias called out, though neither she nor the rest of her peerage expected Vele to do anything of the sort. Strays never did. Come and get me, princess. I'll enjoy playing with your corpses like all the others here, Vele replied from somewhere upstairs. Without a word, several clones of Naruto ran up the wall beside the stairs, avoiding any possible traps, and disappeared into the rooms. Seconds later he grimaced and turned to explain what he had learned. Second door on the right, it's a bedroom with a big walk-in closet. He's some sort of snake monster and coiled up in there with a bunch more bodies. I think the best bet would be just burning him out, honestly, the rook said. He loved a good fight, but they knew going in Vele had potent poison and acid abilities, and hold up the way he was would make it hard for them to attack without just destroying the house. A barrier is already up, so might as well. Akino, I leave it to you, Rias commented as the group stepped back outside and the queen giggled sadistically as she began prepping a powerful fire spell. Moments later the house was engulfed, and a screeching snake-like demon was forced to split from his snake half and reform in his humanoid body to try and escape. Unfortunately for Valet, it was far from the group's first rodeo. Before he could even reach the barrier, Kiba was upon him, slashing out his legs from underneath him and sending the rogue to the ground. Immediately after impact, though, Naruto was pinning him down, painfully wrenching his elbows back in a hold and forcing his face and deadly mouth into the dirt. Stray devil Valet, on my name as Rias Gremory, heiress to the house of Gremory, I sentence you to death for acts against the underworld and your own king. Now die. With that, the red-head king created a small orb of her power of destruction and pushed it into the devil, while Naruto stood up. Valet had little chance to do more than scream once before he disintegrated. Well, that was a letdown. The guy was supposedly a mid-class like us, he barely put up a fight. Naruto commented with a frown. That's because we outplayed him. I doubt he expected anyone to burn the house down around him. He was known as Valet the Pit Viper for a reason. Every raiding game match he was in, he was the defense for his peerage and poisoned any attackers that crossed by whatever hole he was hiding in. Good call, by the way. Rias explained before praising her rook. Naruto had come a long way from the boy he was when he first joined their peerage. Naruto had been a bit of a driving force for the whole peerage to better themselves. He had practically pestered Surzex into assigning the members of his peerage to training their own, and the results were obvious. All of them were mid-class. Akino and Naruto were easily on the upper end of mid-class too. Rias herself had grown quite a lot, and after approaching her mother for training in her power of destruction, she had become far better in its use. There was a reason the Bale family retained the most power in the underworld. Power of destruction remained the hands-down most powerful bloodline among devils. With her mother bringing the power into the Gremory family and both Surzex and Rias gaining it, the Gremory clan was quickly becoming one of the strongest as well. They had the rank of Lucifer with Surzex after all. Even if he couldn't technically show bias toward his original household, the prestige alone benefited the Gremory. Beyond just physical growth, Naruto had arguably grown the most. While Rias' mother had taught him etiquette and proper manners as best she could, it was Zeoticus that had taken the boy under his wing when he noticed the same sort of battlefield genius that Surzex had at his age. Rias would occasionally tease her father about having gotten another son in the deal, much to the prim and proper Lord Zeoticus's annoyance. He would likely never admit how much he truly adored the blonde. It was obvious, though, that he held a special place with the man when he made sure to ask about him in the letters between him and his daughter. Let's finish destroying the house, then head back. While it burns, Kaneko, Naruto, how goes your mission? Rias asked as she used her power to take out a few walls, making the house collapse on itself. Kiryu is definitely getting training from someone. I haven't been able to locate any coven, but she smells of someone's magic apart from her own. Specifically fire magic of some kind. I'll need more time to find out more without risking revealing myself to any possible enemies. The pervert was approached by a fallen angel this afternoon. She asked him on a date this weekend. It's weird, Kaneko commented as she chucked a large stone from the overgrown garden into one of the still standing beams of wood from the house. Rias stopped for a moment and thought about that. A fallen angel in her territory and a possible coven, if not at least a witch and her apprentice also nearby. That spelled all sorts of problems in the near future. She would need to switch things up. Kaneko had several contracts that needed fulfilled soon anyway. Alright, there's a change of plans then. Naruto, I want you to tail Hayate for this date with the fallen while Kaneko completes her contracts. I plan on having my familiar slip him a contract somehow, but I want you there in case he is attacked before he accidentally summons me. Rias ordered as she sent a larger blast of her power to erase one of the piles of debris. Oh. Well, what about Kiryu? He asked as he used a basic water jutsu to stop flames from spreading to the nearby grass. He had been doing his own training with the limited and very reluctant help of Kyubi over the last 3 years as well. Kiba, you are free for the next few days, right? Akino asked with a pleasant smile and amused eyes as she melted down several pieces of metal from the house. The boy tried to hide his grimace, causing her eyes to light up slightly in humor. I suppose I am, Kiba replied. Perfect, good idea, Akino. Rias agreed, sharing a bit of the humor with Akino. Kiba was harassed by the girl much like Naruto, though the older boy honestly had more difficulty handling it as she had a tendency to run over his attempts to stall her advances. So Kiba will be following Kiryu to try and identify her fellow coven members and if possible the location of the coven itself. Meanwhile, Naruto will be shadowing Hayate to make sure he isn't harmed by the fallen angel, and Kaneko will be completing her backlog of contracts. Oh, actually I have a contract that came in that Akino would be better at fulfilling than I would. While I follow the perv, she could complete it with no issue, Naruto said with a smile, shooting a look to his fellow blonde who looked briefly confused before likewise smiling at what Naruto was doing. Excellent, just have your familiar deliver it to hers later tonight or tomorrow so she has time to prepare anything she might need. Rias replied, smirking slightly at the small playful glare her queen shot at the two boys. Anyway, let's finish up here quickly. I have to make a report for this and finish up the rest of my paperwork for the week. She continued with a tired sigh. The peerage nodded as they set back to work, finishing the demolition of the house, and once they were done, only a blank patch of upturned soil remained where the house once stood. Kiba let out a yawn as he followed after Aika in the busy streets of Kuo. It was getting somewhat late, and the knight had been following the girl all day as she did errands. Practically nothing had happened out of the norm. Kiba was even beginning to grow suspicious that they had actually been wrong about her. His sensing abilities were not to the level of the other members of his peerage, but he wasn't a slouch either. It was in Kiba's nature to take his role as Rias's knight very seriously, and that meant honing all of his skills as best he could. That all being said, to his senses Aika seemed only slightly more powerful than a normal girl in magical reserves. Nothing truly special though. After seeing her clumsily walk into traffic after seeing a pair of athletes jogging by, he had to acknowledge she was more durable than was natural. He was inclined to chalk that up to a pervert's abilities though, as the perverted trio at school seemed to receive severe beatings almost daily and be fine afterward. I'm starting to think this was a waste of time, he grumbled as he scowled over at the girl, while she browsed men's workout magazines with drool coming from her mouth. Seriously, she has never seemed this bad in class, and she is terrible there. I didn't think it was possible that was her controlling her urges. Aika was of course a nice enough girl, and Kiba was pretty used to girls being forward with him based on his looks and outwardly gentle nature. That being said, Aika was beyond off-putting in how she reacted to himself, Naruto, and a few other boys at their school. A few girls too now that he thought about it. Rias and Akino had been her victims previously for her game of slipping beside them and grabbing a handful of either their chest or rear. Kiba couldn't figure out how both girls seemed to just laugh it off as if they thought she was really that clumsy. He knew better, and that they just thought it was humorous. The knight was pulled from his thoughts when he saw a strange woman with dark skin in a bright yellow business suit with a skirt walk up and strike up a conversation with Aika. He would have normally ignored it. Beyond being exotic due to her skin color and bright green eyes, the woman was not truly out of place. Sure, she was beautiful, but also old enough to be Kiba's mother, not that that sort of age gap mattered much for devils. Either way, he very nearly wrote her off, as their conversation focused entirely on the prices before them at the market stall. That was until he noticed Aika's odd behavior. She seemed to be trying hard to remain her normal self, but it was easy to tell from someone who had repeatedly suffered from her determined perversion in the past that the girl was nervous around this woman, or more likely nervous to be in public with her. Kiba spread his sense out and nearly stumbled. The woman was definitely a witch. There was no denying it. Her magical power surpassed his own, which for a devil would not have been a great feat, as he was a physical type of fighter, most of his magical reserves being used to give him sudden bursts of additional speed in combat. The issue was humans. Even magically gifted ones had to train a very long time to be on par with supernatural beings. This woman alone could have defeated the stray the peerage defeated recently, and Kiba had no doubt there was more of her kind in the coven. He needed to report back to Rias immediately. Stepping into a nearby alley, Kiba teleported away, catching both Aika and the woman's attention. Turning to the younger girl, who began to shiver slightly at the glare shot her way from her companion, the elder woman violently grabbed Aika's wrist and led her away, causing her to grimace in pain as she tried to keep pace with the much longer-legged woman. Much like Kiba had initially been, Naruto was bored out of his mind while following Haidu and the fallen angel. They had done normal couple things the entire time, and while his sensing was not as great as it would be if he actively used it, giving himself away, he could tell the fallen was gradually feeling more and more guilty about something. However, her guilt was greatly overshadowed by her greed, most likely to try and woo the pervert to her faction's side. As the sun had set and the couple had gradually wound down to simply strolling through a park, Naruto began to hope that the date was finally coming to an end. Then he could report that the fallen was definitely trying to seduce Issei into joining her faction, and that would be that. At least that was his hope. Sadly, as with most things in his life, Naruto was disappointed. Instead of ending the date on a pleasant note, the fallen angel transformed to show her true form, all while asking Issei to die for her. The poor perverted fool was frozen in place, and would have been skewered if Naruto hadn't intervened by snatching the back of his shirt and flinging him to the far side of the fountain away from the murderous angel. "Who the hell are you?" the angel hissed at him while flexing her power to try and intimidate him. "I am Naruto Uzumaki, rook of Rias Gremorys peerage. You are in her territory, now who the hell are you?" Naruto growled out while flexing his own power, overcoming hers and causing her to hesitate. "Rainier. That's who. Now step out of the way, little devil, so I can eliminate this threat." The now named Rainier tried to bluff. She needed the rest of her group with her for this brat. He was clearly at least a mid-class devil, and she had a single pair of wings. "No. Naruto simply replied, and had she not been expecting him to see through her bluff, he would have had her in that single attack. Thoughts raced through Rainer's head as she forced the devil's attack back and attempted to gain some space from him. She recalled the devil's system easily enough. Typically rooks were slower-moving, hard-hitting morons. At least that was the stereotype among her fellow fallen. This rook, though, was extremely fast, and hit just as hard as she imagined a rook would. She had put everything she had into blocking his strike, and still her body ached from the effort, while he simply slid into a stance to continue the fight. Summoning a light spear to try and begin her attacks, Rainer barely dodged the sudden attack from behind as an apparent twin of the blonde boy smashed a small crater into the concrete she had previously been standing on. The new arrival pivoted immediately into a kick and slammed a foot into Rainer's midsection, sending her skidding across the park and into a tree. Rainer barely had time to suck in a breath to replace the air he forced out of her with a single kick. Again the second Naruto was upon her, this time swinging a punch for her face, one that she narrowly avoided, this time taking to the air to try and gain distance. Sadly for her, she had forgotten the original Naruto by this point, and his sudden aerial drop onto her back sent both slamming into the earth. Now, with an arm hooked around one of his opponent's arms, trapping it against her body at an awkward angle, Naruto began pummeling her with repeated punches. However, her second arm remained free and able to produce a light spear that she stabbed into the boy with a vicious grin. Her brief moment of victory was cut short as he puffed into a cloud of smoke, and the second Naruto set about pummeling her much how the first had. Managing to slip from his grasp by stabbing this one as well, the now bloodied and swelling angel retreated and scanned the area. Both of the blondes had proven to be some sort of fakes, and initially Rainer had concluded some sort of sacred gear was at work. Until she saw the true Naruto nearby with his tails, wings, and ears fully revealed alongside his fanged smirk. "Surrender now, little bird, you are outmatched and alone. While I never am, whether it's with my clones or them." Naruto spoke with confidence, sure of his victory, as several red magical circles formed and the rest of Rias' peerage stepped out to back up their friend, not that he needed it. "I know when I have lost. Until next time, Uzumaki. Tell Hyde we'll catch up later." With that parting statement, Rainer caused a bright flash of light that blinded and slightly burnt the members of the peerage while the fallen fled. Rainer had never been a combat type anyway, more for information gathering and espionage. Her speed, on the other hand, was impressive, as she was gone in seconds long before the effects of her stun attack had worn off. She escaped. Naruto growled, calming down as Rias patted him gently on the shoulder to show him it was fine. "Don't worry, they always come back, you know. Next time we'll have her," she said with her usual smile that spread to her peerage members. "Let's check on Hyde," Naruto said as the group stepped over to where Issei still sat, confused, terrified, and practically frozen in shock. "Hey perv, wakey wakey," Naruto said to the boy with no effect. "Let me try," Kaneko said in her flat tone. The Nekasha then proceeded to slap the pervert hard enough across the face to send him sprawling. Rias sent her a disapproving look while fighting back her slight grin, while Naruto, Akino, and Kiba all chuckled at what she had done. "Kaneko, there was no reason to be so harsh. We will need to talk about where you are picking up such violent tendencies later." The redhead joked slightly before turning to face the now blinking Issei. "Issei, are you with us now?" At the boy's nod, she continued on. "Wonderful. Now, Issei, I need you to listen closely, alright? You just witnessed and were nearly victim to what is called a fallen angel. Don't worry, I can better explain things for you at school tomorrow, so I will send someone to pick you up from class in the afternoon. For now, Akino will take you home to rest for the night, since it doesn't look like you are hurt with anything beyond minor bruises. We will just collect you tomorrow and talk about what's happening, okay? Until then, everything you saw remains between us." As she spoke, Rias began to slow down her speech and enunciate more, as if talking to a child, which most would find likely to be insulting if they didn't see the boy seemed to be stuck looking at slight bounce of her chest as she explained things. It would be shocking if he remembered half of what she was telling him. Akino disappeared with the boy as the rest of the peerage likewise teleported back to the clubhouse. There were a few reports they needed to give Rias, and Rias had more dreaded paperwork to push through to her father and brother's offices. The next day, back at school, Issei had been noticeably more reclusive than was usual for him. His two best friends weren't the only ones to notice either, with several other classmates kicking the rumor mill into overdrive over what might have happened. Rias and her peerage had noticed as well, and rather than waiting till the end of the school day, it was decided that they would bring him to the clubroom over the lunch break. Issei wasn't the only one acting slightly different, though. Naruto had noticed his own observation target had seemed distracted today. She also smelled odd, though the scent was not something he recognized, so he had no clue what the issue was. Sadly, he didn't have time to properly investigate during the day, with him needing to be present when Issei was offered a position in the peerage. Still, he made a mental note to keep an even closer eye on Aika's strange behavior. Walking with Kaneko to the clubroom, Naruto couldn't help the small smile at the outbreak of chaos, started from Kiba retrieving Issei for Rias. The school was buzzing with rumors just like it had earlier in the morning at Issei's odd behavior, only now they seemed to focus around the fact that Kiba had made the poorest word choice possible when collecting Haidu. Naruto expected he would have known better that fangirls would overinflate the word Issei I need you with something perverse. The girls were nearly as bad as the perverted trio sometimes. Not that funny, a voice said next to him, causing Naruto to turn and face Kaneko. Are you sure? Come on, Kaneko. You know you cracked a bit of a smile too when you first heard that Yuto and Haidu were planning to elope together today because Haidu's parents wouldn't accept him coming out of the closet, Naruto said while trying not to laugh too loudly. They say the same things about you and Kiba too, she countered, getting his smile to drop slightly. It annoyed him that she wasn't wrong. Oh, like they don't say the same for you and me too, Naruto answered, leaning close and getting an extremely faint, almost unnoticeable blush from the girl before she punched his shoulder with greater than average power. For his part, Naruto laughed it off while rubbing his arm. It hurt, but Kaneko didn't put even close to her full power behind it, and Naruto was far more durable than a human. Finally coming to the clubhouse, the pair of first years made their way to the clubroom and sat down on the couch beside one another, taking time to enjoy the somewhat dimmer lighting. While the sun didn't damage them, it still proved an annoyance for them as devils. Here, though, the clubroom was dimmed enough that they could properly relax. Coming from the kitchenette attached to the clubroom, Akino entered with her usual sweet sisterly smile as she laid a tray of baked goods down for her juniors. The older girl slipped between one of the most sadistic women Naruto had met and arguably the most sweet and gentle girl he knew. Though he had to remain on guard around her lately after getting her placed on the assignment originally meant for Kiba while Kiba was watching Aika. She would get him and Kiba both back for it, he just wasn't sure how yet. The trio made small talk for a time. Akino had been out of class on request from Rias to take care of a few things to ensure if Issei joined the peerage everything would transition smoothly. Since she had missed most of the day already, Naruto and Kaneko filled her in on the teasing material she now had on both Kiba and Issei when they arrived. A little part of him hoped that would be enough to ward her off from a revenge prank. After all, the mission, while one of the most disliked, was really small potatoes, all things considered. After a time, Rias entered, having clearly just gotten out of the shower and dressed, though Naruto was a bit surprised she hadn't purposefully waited for Haidu to arrive. Showing off her body in a towel would likely have been a good recruitment tool for someone like Issei. Not that Naruto was going to complain. He didn't outright hate the boy, but his unresolved issues with Jiraiya, who was as much of a pervert as Issei, as well as his close bonds with the members of the ORC, left the idea of Issei perving on any of the girls something that left him annoyed. Kiba will be here with Issei shortly, so let's talk for a second about what exactly we are going to say to him. Rias began gaining her subordinate's attention. Issei doesn't initially appear to be that valuable of a piece, but we all know how misleading appearances can be. Kaneko can tear a building apart with her bare hands and weighs less than 80 pounds. So I want each of you to treat him with respect expected for a comrade. The group nodded, though Kaneko seemed to hold a bit of a pout at the thought of Issei being one of them. The group didn't wait much longer before the two boys entered the room and Issei went through his normal perverted meltdown over the sight of the three girls. Naruto had to fight to keep from rolling his eyes as the two older girls simply giggled at his behavior. He had thought the boy would be more serious after the previous night's events. It seemed a night's sleep and a few hours of thought was all he needed to be back to his old self. Well, Issei, allow me to be the first to welcome you to the clubhouse of the Occult Research Club. I have no doubt you understand this is a front after the things that happened last night, correct? Rias began, getting an eager nod from Issei. Yeah, that was something, I guess, the boy said, his mood returning to a more solemn demeanor like earlier that morning. I believe a full explanation is needed, so I guess the best point to start with is the supernatural world that humanity sees and myths from around the world is true. Practically all of it, in fact, though some things were a bit twisted in translation. Rias took on a lecturing voice like a teacher. I remember last night, when she sprouted those wings. You called her a fallen angel. Then Naruto, you sprouted wings and tails and big ears too, Issei said while jabbing his finger Naruto's way, getting a deadpan look in return. Yes, Issei. Rias grabbed his attention once more. See, there are three major factions that have power over most of the world: the angels, fallen angels like the one that attacked you last night, and the final of the big three, devils, which is what we are. With that, Rias and the others all sprouted their wings to show off to the newcomer. Issei, while shocked, wasn't totally speechless after recalling the events of last night. Sure, things were weird and a big part of him wanted to think maybe it was all just a crazy dream, but a part of him, the slightly more serious part, he only used when he really had to, could tell that this wasn't just his mind playing a trick on him. Okay, so you are all devils. I was almost killed by a fallen angel. Alright. What were those tails and things though? Issei asked. Rias rose an eyebrow as she glanced at Naruto, who sighed before he stood fully and stepped beside her. First, Issei, let me tell you that there are a huge amount of beings around this world beyond what I've already told you about. That, and there is some overlap. You see, a long time ago a massive war nearly wiped out all life on Earth, including humanity, angels, fallen, and devils. While humans could bounce back easily as your race has a very high rate of birth compared to practically every other sentient species, others like us devils are not so lucky. So after the war, a new method of creating more devils was invented by one of our leaders. The peerage or evil peace system. Not the most appealing of names, but what it can do is amazing, and saved my people from extinction. More on that later. All you need to know at this moment is that this system allows non-devils to become devils through a short ritual. Naruto and everyone here but me have been made devils with this system. Rias explained as Naruto sprouted his tails and ears. Issei took a seat as he absorbed the information that he was being fed. A whole other world hidden from human eyes was opening up to him, and it was understandably a lot for an average teen to take in. His mind stopped at that, an average teen. Why would any of these people bother with someone like him? As his mind narrowed onto the thought, he looked back up to the expectant faces of the devils gathered around him. Why? What? Rias asked, a bit confused by his word choice. Why? Why me? Why did Yuma, or whatever her name was, try and kill me? Why did you save me? Why tell me about all of this? Issei asked, growing mildly suspicious of their goal. Naruto, and the others' eyes widened at Issei's outburst. They had seemingly underestimated the boy. It was clear he was at least smart enough to gather the oddness of his own situation when seeing most humans were left blissfully unaware of the real world. It's cause you have something. Naruto replied bluntly, getting a mild frown from Rias for how he answered. What he means, she said while holding a hand up to stop more questions from Issei, is that you are a special type of human. One born with something called a sacred gear. There are some humans born with gifts that help to level the playing field, as it were. Humans with these gifts are sought out by every group of supernatural beings for one reason or other. You saw last night the Fallen wanted to kill you. Which is strange for its own reasons, as usually a sacred gear user is recruited by a faction to try and bring their abilities to bear on that faction's enemies. That is actually part of the reason you are here now. Rias stepped closer to Issei till she was standing beside him. Whatever your sacred gear is, Issei, it is beginning to awaken. Some awaken at birth, others in puberty or from traumatic events, and some never do. What matters is that now that it has begun awakening, it will alert supernatural beings to your presence, and you will essentially be hunted for the rest of your life. She said. Rias had a slightly apologetic look on her face, but over her lifetime seeing the troubles of both her friends and herself, she knew no life came without its burdens, and the best one could do was embrace that fact and try and make the best of their situation. Issei looked as though he had been slapped as the reality of his situation began to set in. Whatever it was that made him a target seemed like it would only get worse with time, and he had no way of even knowing what was causing it. He was scared. If it hadn't been for Naruto, he would already be dead. He couldn't stop something like that from happening again. Hell, as far as he knew, he was brought here just so these devils could kill him and take his power themselves. Why did you bring me here? Issei asked quietly, now eyeing Rias with a healthy amount of apprehension. This wasn't missed by the peerage, who primarily felt bad for the boy. Each of them had experienced being trapped and isolated before. It was part of what allowed them to connect so well with one another. A shared pain. It's simple, Issei. I had you brought here to join our family. Rias explained with her usual warm smile. After blinking for a few moments, Issei cleaned out his ears in a comical fashion before asking Rias to repeat herself in a very polite tone. Chuckling, Rias obliged the boy's request but was nearly bowled over by his reaction. What? He shouted, causing the rest of the group to grimace with their far more sensitive hearing, particularly Naruto and Kaneko. Just as I said, I want you to join us. Remember when I mentioned the evil pieces earlier? I want you to become a devil. It is probably the best deal you will get too. We will help protect you and even teach you to use whatever your sacred gear is, and you will support us by being a part of my peerage, Rias said, laying the sales pitch out. Wait, so I would become a devil, just like that? Issei asked. Naruto sighed and was ready to move on. He understood the boy's confusion, but if he got one thing it was people, and explaining everything to Issei in one sitting wasn't going to stick with him. You know, I figured you would jump at this idea. I mean, all the strongest devils have harems of beautiful women. Hell, with the evil pieces, most of them collect various supernatural women too to get that exotic flavor. He said with a voice seeming to not care whether the boy chose to join them or not. Which was partially true. He wasn't ecstatic about Hyde joining their group, But if his sacred gear was draconic, it was bound to be powerful, and Rias could use all the help she could get for her problem. Really? Issei shouted in excitement, causing Rias' eyes to twitch slightly. Technically yes, but she began only to be interrupted. Well, sign me right the hell up then. What do I have to do for this ritual? Sacrifice a virgin? Kick a puppy, what? He asked with a fire in his eyes. The group was a little put off by his response, except Akino, who was giggling demurely behind her hand. Nothing like that, just lay down here, and we will try to find the piece that fits you best, Rias said with a sigh, partially regretting this already. She already had to put up with Naruto, Akino, and to a lesser extent Kaneko when they felt mischievous, but she could tell this boy would be an entirely different experience. Laying on the open couch, Issei prepared for some sort of painful experience. Instead, he watched as Rias initially placed a pawn on his chest before widening her eyes in surprise as it only faintly glowed at her before placing second, and then after another moment a third pawn. Chess pawns? Issei asked in confusion, only to be gently shushed by the redhead. Don't worry, the differences in the pieces will be better explained later. She then held her hand above the pieces, and with a bright flash of red the boy let out a startled yelp before he passed out. That's that then? Another new piece, congrats Rias, Naruto said with a small smile. Yes, to be honest his sacred gear must be very powerful, because I don't think he gained any more than the smallest of magical reserves. Really, it's kind of pitiful. Though I think it's worth mentioning, if you hadn't saved him last night, Naruto, it probably would have taken almost twice as many pieces to revive him. That and the training we have all been doing made it a lot easier to fill the gap with my own power rather than more pieces, Rias commented while observing the sleeping boy. She really was curious now just what his sacred gear could be. She expected a single pawn to be enough with all the work she had been putting in training, along with Issei being a fully willing recipient. After a brief meeting to catch up on the day with one another, and Naruto mentioning the odd behavior of Aika, the group broke apart and went their separate ways once more. Akino took Issei home again with a note from Rias pinned to his shirt so he could get back in touch with them. Rias herself was back to doing paperwork for incorporating a new member into her peerage. Kiba set out for yet another overly touchy contract, and Kaneko left to spend some time playing games with Gasper. Naruto though had to get back to watching Aika and so set out to stalk the girl as she seemed to go about her business as normal. The next day, things had gone relatively well, and even with the addition of Issei, who was proving to be a mixed blessing and curse for the peerage, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Except for one glaring issue. Aika Kiria seemed to be out sick. That, coupled with the fact that they knew she was a witch, and that she seemed to be acting oddly the day before, set alarms off in each of the peerage members' heads. After discussing things with Rias and Akino, as the Queen and Rook had slowly formed into sort of advisors for Rias on account of their superior world experience to the more reclusive members of the peerage, it was decided Naruto would leave school early and track the girl down, though Rias expressly forbade him from interacting directly with the girl. Less than 3 hours later, and he had already failed to follow her orders as he was stepping out of his hiding place directly in front of the distracted Aika. Naruto would of course argue he had a good reason, and he truthfully did. Aika was so distracted by that reason she didn't even notice him until he was practically standing right over her. On her wrist and face were a set of darkening bruises that she seemed to be slowly healing with a faint pinkish glow emanating from a small wand in her hand. Naruto could recognize the pattern easily enough. As much as Sakura had liked to put up a front of a perfect family life, she had on occasion failed to hide similar bruises while on Team 7. Naruto had been gifted enough similar bruises by a Konoha shopkeeper throwing him out, or an overzealous orphanage worker himself. Aika. Naruto called out softly, startling the girl, causing the wand to disappear up her sleeve and her face to turn away to try and better conceal the bruising she had. Oh my, Naruto! What a surprise! What are you doing here, handsome? Come to finally give in to my offers, She rattled on with a false quirky joy. It was a nearly perfect facade too. Had he not already seen her injuries, he might have actually bought it. You're hurt. Nice try distracting me, Naruto said with a soft though serious voice. What this, pft. You know I was just trying something new out, and it got a little out of hand. Though maybe I'd give it another go if it was you and me. What do you say? Should I pencil you in? She asked in a faux sultry voice, though Naruto could sense the faint sadness in her voice. Aika, nice try, he said again as he took a seat next to her. The girl looked at him for a second before her smile became less flirty and more sardonic. Most guys lose it when I start saying things like that. Tell a teenage boy I have an older, rougher lover, and he is either too stuck on fantasizing the situation or too put off by how easy I am, she said with a surprisingly honest laugh. You have a fucked up sense of humor. Was all of this just to keep people away from your problems? So they don't know you? he asked. Aika stared at him for a moment, thinking on his question. Really, she didn't see why she'd even tell him. It wasn't much of his business, but he was sweet for stopping to check on her, seeing her bruises. Really, Naruto, I'm not some basket case. I can tell you that the whole bit about checking out the boys and girls at school, and taking underwear, and being able to tell your size with just a glance, impressive by the way, that's all really me. Maybe just not today. It's kind of you to check on me, even when we don't really know one another, but I'm fine. I can take care of myself, alright? Aika's smile had become completely honest in the last couple of moments, though it was nowhere as bright or seductive as she normally sported. She seemed almost cute at the moment. Probably because she wasn't groping his crotch in front of their schoolmates. For Naruto, the last 2 days had shown him a bit of a new side of two of the most perverted people he knew. Similarly to himself, when he still lived in Konoha, it seemed as they amped an aspect of their personality to act as a mask in public. Issei was brighter and more open-minded than he expected of him, and Aika was far different. She was all over the place to him, though he could tell a lot of it was from her own mask to keep him guessing on her actual personality. Well, if you say so. Still, at least take this. I think you will know what it is, Naruto said, handing her a summoning contract, causing her eyes to widen and her body to tense. I thought so. Use it if you get in over your head, alright? Nothing wrong with asking for help. With that, he stood and waved to her as he started walking home, taking the longer path to try and clear his mind of the situation concerning the young witch from his school. He was deeply bothered by the idea of someone abusing another person, especially when Aika was such an open and friendly, if handsy girl. His mind was so focused on the witch and what her coven might be doing in the area, and what Rias would do to him when she found out he had spilled the beans about himself to the second-year girl, that he didn't see the person in front of him till they bounced off his chest and clattered to the ground in a heap. "Oi!" a meek voice called out. Glancing down at the girl that had run into him, Naruto blushed slightly at the revealing position she was in before helping her up. "Sorry, my mind was elsewhere, are you alright?" he asked. He grimaced faintly a second later when he realized who, or more precisely what exactly it was that had run into him. "Oh, you speak Italian? Wonderful, I have been having such a hard time trying to find someone to help me find my way around. I only know a little Japanese," the blonde nun said with pure smile shining his way, just as brightly as the evening sun gleaming off the crucifix around her neck. "Oh, yeah, just half Japanese as you can see," Naruto said, pointing at himself to show his own blonde hair and blue eyes. "I see. Sorry for running into you. I'm just so turned around here and wasn't paying attention," she said with a small frown as she looked around the area. "Maybe I can help." "Oh, that would be lovely. Let's see, I'm trying to find this church here in Ko. Do you know where it is?" she asked. Naruto glanced at the poorly written sticky note that had a church's name on it. He knew the one all right, but he was pretty sure it had been abandoned for a decent amount of time, being as Ko was solidly under devil rule after the region was purchased from the yokai and Shinto pantheon roughly a decade back. With the change to one of the big three running the territory, the elder priest running the church had returned to his home somewhere in Tokyo and left the region to the Gremory and Citri clans. "Yeah, I know the one, but it's on the other side of the city from here, and it's getting late. Plus, I think it's been abandoned for years. Let me take you to my place for the night so you can rest, and I will try to take you there tomorrow. Sound good?" he offered, and was met with a bright smile from the girl in return. "You are a very kind person, thank you," she said. Her eyes then opened again, and she looked surprised. "Oh, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Asia Argento." "Ah, well, nice to meet you too, Asia. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Let's get underway. I'll pick up some food from the restaurant next door, and you can use my room while I use my futon in the living room." He chuckled as she seemed to feel she was imposing, but soon the pair were chatting amicably. "What a sweet girl. She is practically the poster girl for a nun, she's so pure and innocent. There is no way I could have left her alone on the street. That being said, Rias must never know about this. She will already be annoyed with pretty much telling Aika I was a devil. This will just get her to let Akino keep as a chewed toy for a month." He shivered at that thought. As the night wore on, like he had mentioned earlier, Naruto allowed Asia to use his bedroom while he used his futon in the living room. Just as he was getting comfortable, however, he sat straight up with an ear-splitting scream coming from his bedroom. Jumping to his feet, Naruto raced toward the room to help his guest against whatever felt they could attack her in his house. Ko. Naruto flew down the short hall to his bedroom in record time even for himself and practically slammed the door open, ready to open up his own special brand of whoop-ass on whoever thought they could simply come into his house and start something. Then once the door was open and he was standing there with the other two occupants, he found the mix of angry sneer and wicked smiles slide off his face immediately. In the boys' room an odd collection of people now stood. The owner of the apartment, and last to the room stood, clad in Dragon Ball print pajama bottoms, and nothing else. Before him a frighteningly familiar redhead clad in similarly printed pajamas resembled a cat with her hackles raised as she stared wide-eyed at the third and final occupant, who was none other than a petite blonde girl with the most innocent and confused look on her face. Oh, of course she comes over to sleep tonight of all nights. Naruto briefly grumbled while ignoring the deep chuckles from his tenant in the back of his mind. It's okay sister, calm down, Naruto said as he relaxed from his stance. Beside him Rias' eyes bulged before seeming to take in the girl's appearance, and then flicking back to Naruto. Sister? Her mind roared. Why don't you lay back down and Rias and I can go talk in the other room? Naruto said, though it seemed Asia was still a little too keyed up from having a stranger trying to climb into bed with them to attempt that. Naruto, why didn't you tell me you had a sister? A quiet voice interrupted him as he reached out to comfort the girl, bringing him up short with an equally confused face to Asia's. That lasted all of 5 seconds before Naruto realized that Asia did in fact look as though she could be his sister. That, and he was now cursing himself for devil-enhanced puberty, as for the first time since initially meeting her Naruto took a good look at the nun. Seriously, why did a nun own a nightgown that was pretty much see-through? Not to mention, Ria's clothes were always snug but her nightclothes, if she deigned to actually wear any, were practically just another layer of skin. I don't think I can deal with this shit tonight. Maybe I can avoid telling her she's a nun though, Naruto thought, continuing to ignore the growing laughter in the back of his mind. You never told me you had a sister, Rias said, this time her voice sounding very hurt at something so major being kept from her by one of her closest people. Someone who she had shared literally everything with for the last couple of years. Damn it. Rias, she isn't my sister, she's a nun, he said, his voice quieting toward the end. Oh, she's a nun, Rias said with surprise and a hint of relief he hadn't kept his family from her for some reason. Well, that went better than expected. The QB growled through Naruto's mind, disappointed Rias wasn't going to rake his jailer over the coals for this. Wait for it, Naruto replied. Oh, she's a nun, huh? Rias asked with some venom in her voice. There it is. Naruto sighed while his tenant howled with glee that Naruto was in the doghouse with his king. Yeah, Rias, she is a nun. Can we go talk about this in the other room? Asia needs some rest. Just rest, Asia. I'll explain in the morning. Naruto tugged gently at Rias and led her out of the room as the girl tried to fight back a yawn but lost the battle and returned to bed. Between traveling and being lost in Ko all day, the poor girl was still exhausted. Once back in the living room, Rias yanked her wrist out of her rook's grip and settled the mother of all glares on him, stirring up feelings of terror and other more confusing teenage things. Wanna explain yourself, Naruto? Rias hissed through her gritted teeth. Throwing up a couple of silencing barriers around them, he sat on the couch, and Rias lowered herself into the chair, never breaking the glare that was surely starting to burn into her naughty subordinate. I just want to start off by saying, I know you don't like that she is here, but I couldn't just leave her in the street, Naruto said. Why the hell not? Rias, the girl was starving and about to drop, she was so exhausted. Not to mention, Ko may mostly be peaceful, but you and I both know the outskirts she needs to go through has abnormally high rates of crime, especially against women, Naruto pointed out. Her glare dropped to a much lighter scowl and her eyes softened. That would have hated having something like that on her conscience if someone had taken advantage of a girl just because she didn't want to deal with someone from another faction. Still, the fact Naruto was just going to hide it from her pissed her off, and honestly hurt a bit. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, far more calm and no longer ready to get into a screaming match. I thought that would be obvious. Myself and the others are supposed to keep you safe. If word gets out that you had any interaction with members of the church, it hurts your appearance in the underworld. I think the term is plausible deniability or something like that, Naruto said matter-of-factly. Oh, so it was to protect me? Rias asked with a bit of heat in her voice. Well, yeah? I'm not some damsel idiot. I'm your king, you have to tell me about this sort of thing. First thing in the morning she is gone, and that's that. Next time you want to do something stupid, ask me first so I can just knock some sense into you. Now come on, Rias said and motioned toward the futon as she went to lay down. She stopped when she noticed he was staring at her with a dumbfounded look on his face. I know you aren't a damsel, but me and the others are here to protect you, remember? That's the whole purpose of us being in your peerage, right? Not to mention, that girl could barely function when someone was climbing into bed with her, she was so tired. I will escort her to the church on the outskirts after school tomorrow, Naruto replied, causing Rias to snap into a straight standing position in shock. Naruto might be a bit of a wild card, or even a bit hard to manage, but he was never directly insubordinate with her. He had killed at her command before, and he was hung up on the thought of kicking a nun to the curb in the morning? What the hell are you saying right now? Rias hissed, once more getting pissed. The pair were in for a long night. A combination of conflicting morals and stress from a myriad of things keeping the fight going until Rias left to sleep at her own apartment. Something she hated, as she always disliked sleeping alone. At school the next day things were not much better. Outside the club the students could tell there was some sort of tension in the group. Sadly for Issei, most pinned the blame on its newcomer, and he had to deal with mobs of agitated classmates all day for daring to disrupt the great lady, or the school mascot. Racy rumors about Issei interfering with a possible romance between Naruto and Rias had also begun to spread, which didn't help his case either. For the club itself, things were far worse. Naruto and Rias practically remained on the same page at all times, even when teasing or annoying one another. Now though the peerage members, especially Issei, were thrown for a loop by their behavior. Both Naruto and Rias were very emotional people. While they could be calculating or even cold at times, they were at their core beings of passion. As were most devils, their personalities simply amplified that fact. Leading of course to Naruto and Rias all but screaming at one another in front of the rest of the peerage. Furthermore, the two of them were far too similar in tactics, as in both were underhanded in their fights. That included arguments. Both saying things just to embarrass or hurt the other in their anger. In the end, with a huff and a fierce scowl, Naruto left school following the lunch period, deciding that Asia had likely rested enough and he could escort her now. The majority of the occult research club also dispersed, returning for afternoon classes. However, Akino and Rias remained, both standing at Rias' favorite window to watch the school grounds from. He's a stubborn brat, Rias grumbled while staring at Naruto's fading back. The boy had chosen to walk so as to try and cool off his mood before he picked up Asia. Definitely, but I like him as he is. Don't you? Akino asked before giggling slightly as she saw Rias try to remain angry at Naruto. Sadly for her, she was arguably the most soft-hearted high-class devil there was, and there was little she could do to stop the fond smile that spread onto her face at the thought of her peerage, and her rook particularly. Maybe. He's still a stubborn idiot though, Rias said with an exaggerated huff, causing Akino to giggle once again. It hadn't been long after returning home that Naruto and Asia began the trek toward the church on the outskirts of town. Thankfully, Asia hadn't asked about the night before except to apologize if she caused any kind of issue between Naruto and his lover, which sent the poor boy into a blushing and stammering fit to try and dissuade her of such a notion. The pair had taken the trip slowly, Naruto showing her a couple sights and just enjoying the innocent nature of his new, if brief, friendship. Having missed his lunch to fight with Rias, and Asia having not had breakfast or lunch in favor of catching up on her sleep, Naruto took the girl out to eat at small noodle place along the way. It wasn't Ichiraku, but it did in a pinch and filled the pair up. Winding down with their time spent together, Naruto regretted having to part ways with the girl. She was the purest person he had met in his life. Similar to Hinata from back in Konoha. That line of thought caused him to frown slightly and try to focus on finishing his time with Asia on a positive note. Unluckily, or luckily, based on perspective, Naruto felt the sudden pull from one of his contracts as they left the noodle stand. Few realize that the feelings and desires of those that use the contracts can be felt by the devil in question once they are in tuned enough with their magic. While it was a rare skill outside of high class, it most definitely wasn't unheard of in mid-class devils. It helped to avoid ambushes after all if you knew what the person calling out to you desired already. Rias is gonna be even more pissed now, Naruto moaned mentally before frowning slightly. Asia, I'm sorry, I can't take you to the church right now. I promise I will take you there in person, but for now go with these two back to my house. I'll explain later. Naruto wanted, of course, to be able to see her off in person and not with a clone. Asia was just stunned by the sudden existence of multiple Narutos. Watching Asia and his doppelgangers leave, Naruto immediately teleports to his contract only for someone to yank him down behind what appears to be a ruined sofa with yellow patches that he hopes are something other than what his mind thinks they are. That was fast, the grabber says as the owner of the voice lets their hands wander. Hello to you too, Aika. What's wrong? Naruto asked as the girl's hands slowly left him, and she faced him more seriously than even the day before when speaking of her bruises. I don't know what else to do. I know this area is a devil's territory, but beyond that I don't know how this works. How do I make a contract with you? She said. The girl's voice had kicked up a couple octaves and she seemed to peek over the ruined couch into the rest of the alley as if expecting someone to have followed her. First just take a breath and tell me what's going on. As for the contract thing, just using that to summon me pretty much started the process. Think less of signing away your soul and more your taxi cab meter is running and the value goes up with your request, but a base requirement is needed for just summoning me at all. Naruto commented, far too nonchalant for Aika's taste, as she blinked owlishly for a moment before shaking her head and slapping her cheeks to clear her mind. Putting aside all the things I want you to do, or all the things I could do to pay for it, she began, gaining a tired sigh from the blonde. I summoned you to warn you. I know I'm a witch. My coven leader has lost it though. She hasn't just gone off reservation, she has emigrated nations away from reasonable at this point. The clothes are all following along too. You have to actually tell me what is going on, Aika. They're trying to create a new summoning creature. A monster. They have to do a ritual to bring it to life though, and it requires human sacrifice. She said, again peering around looking for her coven mates. Shit, what is with this town? Naruto asked aloud. What do you mean? Ko used to be a yokai hub, then for a while it was a sort of joint community for the church and the yokai that allowed them to have a neutral area in Japan to meet. Then the church left and the Mao leased it from the yokai, and within the last couple months, there has been a surge of stray devils, a random coven of witches, a band of fallen, and evidently the church is looking into the area again, he said with an exasperated sigh. Oh wow, I get it. Kinda off topic though, Aika said as her mood went back to being stressed by her former coven's actions. Right. So you said they had to do a human sacrifice and ritual and everything. Where? Also, what exactly does it all entail? Like, is there a magic crystal I can break and disrupt this shit, or maybe some big cauldron I can tip over? He asked, getting a flat stare in response. You realize we aren't fucking cartoon characters, right? She asked him with an annoyed tone. There is totally a cauldron I can tip over or something to ruin this plan, isn't there? He asked with a cheeky grin. Aika was silent for a while before she let out a sigh. You are very lucky you are cute, you know that, right? Otherwise you would just be an annoying first-year brat. She growled out. There is a brazier in the center of the room. The sacrifices will be around it, in one in each cardinal direction. Then I guess that's pretty much it. I obviously wasn't invited to participate after I tried to stop them from slitting our classmates' throats on the first attempt earlier today. Wait, what the fuck? How are you just telling me that it's our classmates and that they already tried once before only now? No, you know what, we have spent way too much time here, Naruto said before he stood up. Rias is gonna be like triple pissed off at me today. I want you to know that you are like at the least responsible for a third of that. Naruto growled down at Aika, making her confused before she felt his energy spike and the alley soon filled with red light as several others joined them. I can explain, Aika heard Naruto say before he seemed to grunt as a hand shot out and popped the back of his head. Oh, you will be doing a lot of that later, Rias said as she looked down at Aika, who blinked back in an faux innocent manner. Get up, Kiryu, Rias sighed out. Really, this whole living on Earth thing was turning to crap. I know you know who I am. Aika froze briefly before standing and laughing awkwardly. This week had been getting weirder and weirder. Now, with finding out that the devil boss of this territory was Rias Gremory, Aika was mentally kicking herself. It was completely obvious in retrospect. The leader of her coven had told her that Naruto was just the servant of whatever devil held the territory, and that the boss was the younger sister of the current Lucifer himself. She just hadn't known Lucifer's name beyond his title. Naruto hung out with Rias and her group enough that she should have made the connection though. Gremory, Aika mumbled, causing the already annoyed Rias to roll her eyes. Sorry, Aika started only to get a look from the gathered devils. Right, well, when the coven found out you were looking into me, they sort of sped up their game. Rather than wait a few months and groom the perfect sacrifices, they just grabbed some of our classmates. The end result won't be that big of a difference, I guess. They just needed virgin sacrifices. Oh, so witches are the ones that sacrifice virgins, Issei commented, getting the rest of the group to look at him. The boy blushed and waved for them to continue. Who did they take? Naruto asked. 4 second years. 2 boys and 2 girls, 1 for each of the cardinal directions, she said. A few hours earlier, Matsuda Ishino and Motohama Yashiro were running for their lives. Over the last few days, the third member of the trio had gone AWOL, and so the 2 boys had subconsciously pushed to make up for their group's diminished quota of perverted acts. Adversely, the fact that their third member had somehow magically become one of the in people with the popular students at school, Matsuda and Motohama had also begun to suffer far worse punishments from their natural predators. The Kendo Club. Keitei Soga and Murayama Akiyama were the acting presidents of the girls' Kendo Club of Ko Academy. The 2 of them were relatively well-liked students, and to most were friendly and kind. However, above all things, they had a problem with perverts and a love for the occult research club clique. Over the last couple of days they had noticed not only that Issei Hayato, the effective leader of the perverted trio, had wormed his way within the ORC, he also seemed to be causing issues with it as well. No one had ever seen Naruto and Rias act so angry with one another before, and so the girls could only conclude Issei had done something. For the most part, the girls had kept their anger at the situation either contained or directed at who they felt was the proper party to blame. Issei alone. Unfortunately for the two boys tangentially connected to the main object of their ire, they were once more caught peeking on the kendo club while its members changed after practice. They also did a better job than usual too, managing to catch the club while most were clad in nothing or only towels. All except Keitase and Murayama. So, Matsuda and Motohama were running for their lives as two very angry and frustrated girls gave chase. The boys had initially hoped leaving school grounds would cause them to give up the chase but had no such luck. Instead, Keitase and Murayama were beginning to show their superior physical fitness as they gained on the boys while racing through Kuo. It had felt like they had been running forever, but just as the boys were about to surrender and accept their beatings, something interrupted. Or rather, someone. A gorgeous foreign woman seemed to appear out of nowhere. She was a dark-skinned foreign woman with pale hair and enchanting yellowish eyes, clad in arguably the tightest business suit boys had seen. "Oh, excuse me, I seem to have gotten into your way," she said with poor Japanese, not that either boy noticed. "MILF." Motohama mumbled, only to receive a pop on the head from his friend, who tried to play the whole thing off in front of the beauty. For her part, the woman only giggled demurely behind her hand as the two girls caught up to the group. Similarly to the two boys, Keitase and Murayama were entranced by the pleasant woman. Her beauty was obvious, but the way she carried herself seemed to say she was of a higher class than the students themselves. "Well, you four really are a perfect gift for the day. You have no idea how much I was stressing out before bumping into all of you," she said with a bright smile, causing the students to instinctively smile back. "Would you all lend me a hand with something?" she asked sweetly, getting a round of nods from the group as their eyes slowly grew more and more glossed over. "Wonderful. Just this way, please," she said while guiding them gently toward an unnaturally dark alleyway. As the teens grew nearer and nearer to the alley, the woman stopped for a brief moment in surprise. One of the boys, the one with glasses, seemed to hesitate for a slight moment, forcing her to apply more power into her spell over him. It seemed he was special, if only marginally so. What a waste. Sadly, things were already in motion, and these four poor souls would have to do in the time crunch she and her sisters found themselves in. Present. If Rias had been angry before, now she was furious. The fact that a witch coven was within her territory without permission was bad enough. That they had kidnapped humans residing, unknowingly or not, within her lands was a slap to the face. The fact that it was her schoolmates made it personal. Naruto was simply happy Rias now had someone else to be angry at. Maybe it would be good to vent all that frustration on these witches. Plus, Rias liked being a hero, and saving classmates from being sacrificed for some ritual would definitely put her in a good mood. The peerage took a moment to prepare themselves as they approached the dilapidated warehouse Aika said held her coven and their victims. The group checked what few items of equipment they possessed. Kiba summoned a sword, Kaneko slipped on some gloves, Naruto tightened his kunai and shuriken pouches down. All the while Issei stood awkwardly glancing between the intense and determined devils around him. "Are these witches going to be a really tough fight?" he asked with some nervousness in his voice. "Hopefully not, but it's best to be prepared," Rias said. Aika said there's only 3 witches. Usually a witch is weaker than devils and only have a couple direct spells like small fireballs or something. The real trouble you have to watch out for are hexes though, Naruto said. "Hexes?" Issei asked. "Yeah, they're real bad," Kaneko said with a glimmer of something in her eye. "Kaneko is right, some hexes are terrible. Like one that can turn its target impotent," Akino said, sharing the glimmer in Kaneko's eyes. "Oh, don't get me started on the things they can do. I heard that some poor new pawn in one of the Bale peerages was hexed to only ever attract extremely muscular and hairy men. All women were repulsed by him," Naruto added after catching on. "Be bullshit," Issei argued. "No, Naruto is right. I have been trying to learn a hex that shrinks a man's junk to micro size to distract them in battle. It's one of my teacher's favorite attacks," Aika said. "Maybe we should think about this some more before just rushing in," Issei said as he began to sweat. "What about Matsuda and Motohama? Imagine what horrible things are being done to them the longer we take," Naruto asked. Issei was gripped his face in his hands and let out a low moan of anguish, getting small cheeky smiles throughout the group. Finally his head raised though, and determination flared to life in his eyes. "You're right. My buddies are relying on me. We have to save them from such terrible things, and if it's too late for them not to be hexed by one of those terrible attacks, then I will avenge them myself," he declared, finally breaking the dam as the others burst into laughter at his heroic stance. "Alright, that's enough," Rias said with a smirk as she reined in her group. "Same as usual, Kaneko breached the door, Naruto and Kiba are first in. I want you to stay by Aika and help her however you can, Issei. Akino, you and Kaneko will stick together, and I'll follow behind Naruto and Kiba," she ordered. The group nodded. Then after a silent countdown, Rias nodded to the white-haired girl. Drawing her fist back, Kaneko slammed her hand into the center of the double doors, blowing both back and hanging off their hinges. Naruto and Kiba wasted no time, sprinting past Kaneko and into the dim room, freezing once they reached their positions. As the others came in behind them, they too froze. They were too late. The bloodied corpses of 4 classmates lay strapped down to makeshift platforms around a large creature. The monster was easily larger than the whole of Rias' peerage combined. An odd combination of a giant bat, a squid, and what looked to be an elephant. It was horrendous, but that still was nothing to the soulless hollow eyes that locked onto them. "You treacherous little bitch. Did you think we didn't know you and your devil friends were coming, Aika?" the dark-skinned woman said with a snide tone. "It doesn't matter if you knew we were coming. You're intruding on my territory, you've harmed my charges, you will get no mercy in return for such actions," Rias said with a scowl. Any humor from teasing Issei earlier was long gone. Instead, her anger from earlier in the day had returned 100-fold at the sight of her dead classmates. "Oh dear, the little princess is angry, girls. What a frightful sight," a second witch commented. Unlike the first, her skin was a nearly paper white and flawless, and rather than the pale-colored hair and eyes, her hair was a deep raven black. Just as the first witch, though she was unnaturally beautiful and carried herself in a definite grace. "Let's just get this over with. The beast will need to kill another peerage after this one before we can set up framing those fallen angels after all," the final witch commented. Just like the first, the witch was a beauty. Her golden tan skin and golden blonde hair made her seem the stereotypical supermodel from America, though her bored expression marred her attractive features. "You're right. Beast, kill them and eat the corpses. I don't want too much of a mess left," the first said casually. With that, the monster launched itself at the nearest 2 targets. Naruto and Kiba met the beast's charge with one of their own, and the battle commenced. While Naruto and Kiba danced around the much larger creature looking for opportunities to cut it with their sword or knives, the others engaged the witches themselves. Issei, lacking any kind of training, could do little but dive behind something to avoid being roasted by a pair of emerald green fireballs. Thankfully, the witch attacking him, the blonde woman, was soon distracted as Akino and Kaneko began double-teaming her. Their mix of ranged and close-quarters attacks keeping the witch off balance and unable to get a properly powerful spell off to fight back. Rias shocked her enemies with the speed she got a blast of her power of destruction off. The surprisingly fast-moving attack slammed into the dark-haired witch, flinging her away from the battle but not fully killing her. With the dark-haired woman seemingly out for the fight, Rias and Aika worked together to battle the leader of the coven. "You'll pay for that, you red-haired bitch," she shouted, unleashing a blast of pure magical energy and nearly hitting Rias. Rias pushed her shock at such an attack to the back of her mind. Few witches or mages could focus pure magic to such a concentrated level like that blast. Aika close by let loose an attack of her own. A very small, though fast-moving ball of flame. Sadly, Aika had only recently begun learning magic, and the witch batted the flame away with a scoff. "Why I ever thought you would be a worthwhile student is beyond me, Aika," she said before completely ignoring her in favor of attacking Rias with a massive gout of flame that lit the room in an eerie green glow. "Don't worry though, I hate to waste things, so you will make an excellent thrall for the coven." On the other side of the room, the silent beast and 2 boys fighting it continued their battle. It was a stalemate. While Naruto could likely get in and kill it if given the chance, he simply couldn't keep up. Despite being one of the fastest rooks to exist, Naruto was still a rook and needed to train doubly hard for speed or magical abilities than he would for pure physical strength and durability. While he had landed several glancing blows, they barely seemed to be registered by the creature, and Kiba simply lacked the strength with his sword attacks to break the monster's tough skin. They needed a new strategy. "Kiba, you need to switch with Akino or Rias. I need someone to tie it down just long enough to land a good blow on this damn thing," Naruto called out to his comrade. The knight hesitated briefly. It defied his natural tendencies to back off, but Naruto had proven himself in their spars to be plenty gifted with tactics when in a fight. "Understood," he called back and zipped across the room towards Akino's position. Once there, Kiba realized things were not going as planned with this fight either. Where Kaneko and Akino had once had a single witch pinned between their attacks, now they faced the blonde and recovered dark-haired woman. Both women were clearly gifted witches as well, the dark-haired woman having surprisingly healed most of the damage from Rias' earlier blast. Her healing abilities gave her more offensive-based comrade all the breathing room she needed to turn the fight more into her favor. Something was wrong. These women weren't the typical witch coven. They had already shown to be far more skilled and experienced than should have been expected. Akino, Naruto needs a caster type to help him with the monster, Kiba said as he used his blade to deflect a lightning spell downward, scattering blasted concrete from the floor. Well, Yudokuin, maybe you could ask Rias. I'm sure you can see I'm slightly preoccupied, she said with a false sweet smile before letting a large blast of lightning arc toward her opponents. The bolt instead struck a metal beam that gave the two women some cover, heating the metal to a glowing red. Akino clicked her teeth in annoyance, and released another massive blast of lightning, causing the beam to sag as it melted from the heat coursing through it. Sadly, both women had already moved on to new cover. I see, perhaps I can do something to help? Kiba asked as he danced around a set of icicles springing from the floor. President needs help too, Kaneko commented flatly. The girl had slight tears in her uniform and her hair was disheveled. However, her condition didn't bother her nearly as badly as the fact that she couldn't get close enough to the witches to land a blow. We need some sort of opening here. Then we can help Rias. Naruto will just have to hold on for a while, Akino said with finality. The other two nodded and prepared to launch their attack. Kiba raced up the left side around several empty barrels and crates, while Akino launched arcs of lighting overhead, allowing Kaneko to sprint across the shortest path directly between the two groups. It just wasn't enough. A blast of wind sent both Knight and Rook careening across the floor to land in a heap at Akino's feet. Just as the girl leaned down to help her younger friends, the blonde witch seemed to appear before them with a hand blazing a sickening green color. You little children really don't know who you are dealing with, do you? She mocked, preparing the death blow. A wet thump dropped her to the ground. A quickly growing pool of blood from a gash on the back of her head hinting at what happened. Standing over her with a bloody piece of broken concrete stood Issei with a terrified look on his face. Hesitating only briefly, the boy reared back and slammed the chunk of debris into the downed woman's head. He stared down at the clearly dead woman, then at his friends who shared a shocked look at his actions. He stammered. You did good, Issei. Really? Akino quickly said as she and the others recollected themselves. They would need to help the boy through this later, but, for now, they had another pair of witches to kill. You little shit! A sudden scream echoed through the room, causing all four to turn and look at the dark-haired woman sporting a grief-stricken face. I'll flay you alive for this, you mongrel! She hollered before her hands seemed to sparkle, and the woman cast her spell. Rather than hitting Issei, though, it instead impacted Kaneko, who had shoved the pawn out of the line of fire. A mix of wind and water magic flung the small girl across the room closer to Naruto's fight. No one to cover you now, witch, Akino said with a growl before unleashing the largest blast of lightning she had so far directly into the woman's chest, sending her into the wall. However, Akino didn't stop there, instead pouring more and more lightning into the woman as she screamed until only her twitching and burnt corpse remained. With Rias and Aika, the fight had also bogged down into a contest of spells. Aika sadly simply wasn't powerful enough to keep up with the two elder girls. Her coven leader was older than even she could recall, kept young by vow rituals every few years, while Rias was a devil, a race simply gifted with more power and magic than humans naturally possessed. Rias burned away yet another of the woman's many fireballs with her power of destruction. While Rias was indeed more powerful than her enemy, a mix of the woman's greater experience, fluidity, and range of spells, as well as the fact Rias was having to also partially shield Aika from attack, was making it nearly impossible for her to go on the offensive. Her enemy, however, had no such restriction, and so she continued to hammer away at Rias with blasts of fire and other spells. She looked almost to be enjoying herself. The giggles coming from her confirmed that. You know, it has been centuries since I have gotten a chance to truly let all this pent-up magic out. It feels good. For that alone, I might let you watch as our new pet eats your friends rather than having you go first. She taunted as another set of flames singed Rias' once immaculate uniform. You and your monster will be dead soon enough, so just shut up and fight, Rias replied, taking out the driver's side of a rusted-out car left in the warehouse. You devils are supposed to be able to banter. You must be a prude, the witch giggled out. Rias was about to snark back at the woman before a scream brought both sides to a standstill. Turning to look back across the room, all three women's eyes widened in shock at the sight before them. The dead witch at Issei's feet, the reeling dark-haired woman, and the coming blast for the boy. Rias nearly shouted in worry when Kaneko was sent flying across the room, but the witch practically howled as she watched her dark-haired friend die at Akino's hands. "I've changed my mind," was all she said before mumbling a strange language and flicking her hand toward the two girls. Unlike Rias, who was worried for her rook, Aika hadn't truly taken her attention off of the woman. She knew firsthand how vindictive and terrible she was. It was almost on instinct that she stepped in front of the sudden hex sent at herself and Rias, taking the full brunt of the attack. Both Rias and the witch were shocked that Aika had done such a thing. They barely knew one another, yet Aika had taken an attack for her. A dangerous one if the discoloration of her skin and sudden cries and gasps of pain were any indication. Rias didn't lose a beat this time though. Twisting, she blasted the woman back with a wall of power of destruction. While not overly powerful itself, and unlikely to have killed her, the attack slammed into her like a truck and scoured her beautiful flesh, leaving nothing but scars and burning hair behind as she shrieked in pain. For Kaneko, things had gone equally poorly. Instead of slamming into the ground as she had hoped, instead she found herself wrapped in one of the tentacles of the monster summoned by the witches. The mucus running down it acted like acid, burning her skin, just as tiny spines all along its length cut into her. The girl was a rook though, and with her durability and strength she broke free, taking one of the creature's tentacles as a trophy before dropping in a heap. The acid and cuts had done far more damage to her than was usual, and Kaneko whimpered slightly in pain. Naruto's eyes narrowed to slits immediately after seeing Kaneko collapse. His breathing grew labored and his yokai features became apparent. Kyuubi's yokai damaged him less than it once did, but it still caused him agony to use, and only when emotionally distraught did he pull on its power. Now, he had the speed he needed to pin the beast all on his own. The fight from there was short. His fist plunging through the creature's chest with a repeated series of strikes like a jackhammer. Rather than remove his hand, Naruto instead plunged his second fist in beside it, and began tearing the monster in half. It flapped and writhed to try and break free, but not that he had a solid hold on it. Naruto wasn't letting go. With a final grunt of effort, the creature split in two from its chest. With the monster dead, Naruto released the power of his tenant, and glanced at the burns that now ran across his skin from the power forced through his body. His limit to how much his body could handle seemed to diminish every time he used the power. Making his way over to Kaneko, Naruto was happy that her injuries weren't terrible. A night of healing and the burns and cuts would heal without scars. Covering the girl, whose clothes had burned away from the monster's acid, in his own uniform he helped her to her feet before joining the others where Rias and Aika were closer to the center of the warehouse. "What happened?" Naruto asked, looking at Aika. Rias had leaned the girl up against a slab of concrete as her breathing became harsher and more labored. "She was hit with one of the witch's hexes," Rias said sadly. Aika gurgled slightly, turning her eyes to Naruto, causing him to kneel down beside her. He could see the fear in them. More than that, he could see how certain she was of her death. "Please," she whispered. "What?" "Just tell me what I need to do to help you," Naruto said with resolve in his voice. It was his nature to help those that needed it. Aika was honestly a kind girl despite everything, and he wanted to help her. "Nothing can stop it. Just please revive them." "I know she can. That's how devils work," Aika choked out. "Don't worry about them. I planned on bringing them back to make up for failing them anyway." "What do we need to do to help you?" Rias asked. "Can't the hex causes everything to become pain? It gets worse over time. Breathing, crying, speaking. Everything hurts." The girl whimpered as tears ran down her face. To her it felt as if something was cutting its way down her cheeks with a knife. "Kill me." "No, we just have," Naruto argued. "Please, it hurts," she whimpered out. The group was silent for a moment as they stared at one another. Slowly, Rias led the others away from the two. They had somehow formed a bond in such brief interaction, and while either Naruto or Aika considered the other close here in a warehouse with one of them about to die, it didn't matter. Even the smallest comfort was welcome. Gently placing her into his arms, Naruto gave her a soft hug and carefully eased her into a better spot. "Are you sure?" Naruto asked. His reply was a jerky nod. "I will make sure Rias revives you too, Aika. You'll be one of us then, okay?" Naruto said with a sad tone. The girl hummed in response, the pain of speaking more than she wanted at the moment. It was quick. Coating a kunai in chakra and pressing it up into her heart made sure it was as fast as he could manage at the moment. No doubt the pain was still excruciating, but he just hoped it was fast enough to give her some mercy. Joining the others, while carrying Aika's body, Naruto looked more grim than Issei had ever seen the younger boy. In fact, all of the peerage looked bloodied, bruised, and exhausted. He still couldn't shake the feeling of killing the witch earlier with that rock. He felt an odd mix of sickened and pleased at his action, which confused him. "You did a good job, Issei," Naruto said beside the boy, causing him to look over at him in disbelief. Really, you did? You saved members of your peerage and helped us win a really tough fight that we weren't ready for. You haven't even been trained to fight yet, and still you did what you could, the blonde affirmed. All I did was hide and hit that chick with a rock, Issei said with a frown. Sometimes that's what needs to be done, Naruto replied as he stepped over to Rias and laid Aika beside the other dead students. It was my responsibility to provide protection for not only these four but Aika, too. She doesn't really have any friends or close bonds at school, but I think she will fit in perfectly with us, Rias said while nodding as if to agree with her own words. Pervert patrol, Kaneko said with a sigh. In a matter of days their peerage had somehow adopted all four of Koa's well-known perverts into their family. She wasn't exactly happy. She didn't want them dead. Well, maybe the perverted trio could die. She didn't want Aika and the Kendo girls dead though. I'm sure it will be fun to tease our new members, Akino said with a small smile as she plucked bits of concrete from her hair. I wonder if I can teach Katasui and Murayama some things, Kiba said with a faint smile of his own. I won't have to keep all this stuff a secret from Motohama and Matsuda, Issei said with a relieved smile. It would be good to have his best friends as part of this weird, terrifying, and dangerous new world. Well, Rias, what's it gonna be? Naruto asked. The redhead waved her hand in the air and withdrew her remaining evil pieces. Carefully placing the appropriate pieces on each of the fallen students' chests, she ran through her incantation. With a flash of red, the 5 bodies seemed to heal before their eyes. Wounds and injuries faded away and their chests began to rise and fall with breath once more. Excellent. We'll be able to welcome 4 new pawns into our family. One of the boys seems to have a sacred gear of some type. Not near as powerful as Issei's, though he does have a much larger magical reserve to compensate somewhat, Rias said as she began teleporting the students to the clubhouse. Naruto, I want you to use your transformation ability to go and collect clothes for each of them from their homes and tell their parents they are staying at friends' houses. We'll put a blanket spell over them to forget about not seeing them for a whole day later, Rias ordered before Shikiba, Kaneko, and Issei disappeared to finish healing the non-life-threatening injuries on the new pawns. Naruto sighed deeply. This day had ended up being entirely too much. He created some disguised clones and teleported them to the new members' houses. Mondays suck, he grumbled to the only remaining peerage member as she finished burning away the corpses, and one silently screaming yet still living witch. I do believe it is Wednesday, Naruto, Akino said with a giggle as the once beautiful woman finally turned to ash before her. Yeah, well then I hate, he began to joke back only to freeze suddenly, and his eyes glaze over. Shit, Asia, Naruto shouted as he began prepping another teleportation circle. Naruto, stop. Rias already told you to not have contact with that girl. I know you are just trying to help her, but you have to realize the problem you could start. It's not our issue to be involved in. Akino scolded him with a frown. By that logic, Akino, Rias shouldn't have become involved with any of us. I'm just some yokai, same with Kaneko. Kiba is a cast-off from the church like Asia is, and do you want me to get started on you and Gasper? He asked. Naruto didn't wait for an answer before disappearing with his teleportation circle. Akino, left alone in a cavernous warehouse, the smell of burnt flesh and hair strong, sighed sadly. I know, but she just doesn't want you to dive in over your head, stupid boy. She sighed out. No matter how right you might be. With that she too teleported, though she was off to see Rias and tell her what was happening. Naruto's apartment. Naruto appeared in what was supposed to be his apartment. Instead, he found half his roof gone and most of his belongings ruined. Asia, it was clear, was long gone. Fucking fallen angels. Naruto cursed. Don't worry, Asia, I'll save you. The mental image of Asia's terrified face as Rainier snatched her up was burnt into his mind thanks to his clones. And if I have to, I'll kill every last one of you damn crows. Chapter 4, Sweetest Sister. Ko. ORC Clubroom. It had been a week since Asia had been kidnapped. 7 full days of Naruto searching Ko top to bottom for traces of the fallen angels that had been sniffing around the area, and he couldn't turn up a single clue. It was driving him mad. With his failed search, and growing issues with Rias, not only the whole peerage, but the entirety of Ko Academy had noticed the severe change in Naruto's attitude. The usually friendly and playful first-year boy had become visibly agitated, and often snapped at others if bothered even slightly. This had begun to weigh on the others too. Currently Rias was educating her newest peerage members on more basics of their new life in the clubroom. Overall, the new additions were sliding well into their new roles. Keites and Murayama were clearly happy to simply be part of the in-group even if they had to be devils to do so. Motohama and Matsuda had attempted to give Issei a hard time about trying to keep this all from them, leading all three boys into a pointless argument which the majority of the group simply ignored. Akino and Aika were getting along far too well. They had teased each other briefly but now were circling the poor second-year boys of their group like a couple of harpies, purposefully putting down Motohama and Matsuda about taking less pawns than Issei, before popping his inflating ego, reminding him he couldn't even use the most basic of teleportation spells while the supposedly weaker boys could. While all this continued on, Kaneko and Kiba continued their usual routine as best as possible, with the night finishing off some report for Rias after a contract and Kaneko focusing intently on her snacks. Rias herself was largely happy with everything. Outside of one piece of her peerage, of course. Naruto was stubborn, she had known that since shortly after meeting the boy. Usually she was fond of that characteristic, stubbornness translating directly into determination. This, however, was proving to be the first time she had found herself hating it. Despite her punishments and orders, Naruto had continued his search for the missing nun and had gradually worn himself down. Today the boy had shown up to school with deep circles under his bloodshot eyes, and his usually stylishly messy hair looked more like a bird's nest. His uniform was wrinkled and he hadn't even bothered with a tie or vest. He was almost late today as well, and was the last to join them in the clubroom for lunch. No doubt he planned fully to not even show up after classes as he had done the last few days. Rias glanced around the room. It was clear by the flat scowl Naruto had on his face as he leaned up against the wall, far from her and the others, that he had no intention in participating in any sort of initiation or guidance of the new members, at least until his mood had improved. The other older members of the group, as well as Issei and Aika, looked at Naruto with sad and worried expressions. It was clear he wasn't usually like this. The new pawns all seemed to curl in on themselves slightly, especially the girls. Unlike the more senior members, they couldn't be sure of his normal attitude, but picking up the changes from the rest of the peerage, they felt partially to blame for whatever was going on with him. The time spent together was as short as Rias had expected. Naruto hadn't even opened his mouth throughout the break, and the others had all spoken quietly and shortly. She had hoped to be giving her new pawns a warm and welcoming introduction over their first days as devils. What a mess. Rias groaned as she dropped herself into her chair, rubbing at her eyes as she glanced up to the only other two people in the room. Kaneko and Akino were quiet as the elder girls cleaned and the younger polished off her last snacks. It took a moment to recall that today both the first and third year homeroom teachers were having a meeting, and so their classes were given a free study period to catch up on anything they needed to. What should I do about him? She asked the two, surprising them slightly. It wasn't so much that her asking them was surprising. Just that a few days earlier Akino had offered some advice to try and calm both Naruto and Rias down after a fight, and had instead received a slightly overzealous punishment from Rias for insubordination. Though overzealous punishments from Rias were more in line with slaps on the wrist from another high-class devil, so little had really happened. The message had still been conveyed. Rias was laying down the law with Naruto and the others were not to interfere. At least that had been the sentiment then. Now, though, she had no idea how to proceed with this situation. He should be doing as you said, Rias, but Akino stopped for a moment as her best friend turned her eyes to look at her and listen. But what? She asked. It's just something Naruto mentioned to me a week ago. I don't think I'm all on board with his little crusade for this nun, but he made a good point, she said as she sat down. Oh, and what good point was that stubborn idiot making? Rias asked with a faint growl. It held a lot less agitation and a lot more exasperation than she had earlier in the week, or even day. Well, I had reminded him that you didn't want him having contact with the nun. I reminded him it wasn't our issue to begin with. He said that the same could be applied to each of us in your peerage too. He said with that logic you shouldn't have gotten involved with him and Kaneko, as they were just some yokai. She sent an apologetic glance to the younger girl on the nearby couch. Kiba was a cast-off from the church just like the nun is, and the violet-eyed beauty trailed off after that. Thinking of her own circumstances made her not wish to continue. Not that she needed to, with Rias' mind finishing the words for her. This is different. This entire mess could lead to a skirmish between all three factions, which could lead to sanctions and Mao knows what else against all of us. You know what a blow to my image could do if it got out I was picking fights with fallen angels over nuns. Rias gradually became more miserable as she spoke, the words coming out more like a moan of pain than anything else. Akino bit her lips slightly at the clear agony the situation was putting her friend in. Rias was conscious of her image in the underworld. As heiress to one of the most prevalent families and sister to one of their rulers, it was a necessity. However, while she might have enjoyed some leeway in this situation, normally things were not in her favor. It was an open secret she despised the arrangement she had with a son of the Phoenix clan. That in itself was no issue as well. Most devil women were known to make disapproval of an arrangement for their hand widely known if they disliked it. The true issue came from the fact that Rias was a more established devil than she was, and her peerage of misfits, as some had come to call them, had been used to paint her as incompetent and weak. In devil society, being weak was worse than just about anything else. No doubt Rias was using that to increase how much power he would have once the arrangement went through should Rias fail to stop it. Already rumors about him being made a guardian over Rias' peerage once they wed had been spread. Something rare but not entirely without precedent. That thought alone truly drove Rias worry and distress. Abruptly Kaneko tore both the older girls from their thoughts as she stood up and started up her magical circle. "Kaneko?" Rias asked with a raised eyebrow as she leaned back up from resting her head on the desk. "Going to help Naruto look for the nun," she said softly with no emotion, causing both of the older girls to narrow their eyes in surprise and annoyance. "Have you listened to a single thing I have said for the last week?" Rias nearly growled, causing Kaneko to actually flinch slightly. "Naruto says abandoning a comrade makes you worse than trash when we train," she simply replied before stepping into the circle and disappearing. Rias and Akino were silent for a while before Rias let out a faint groan, plopped her face back on her desk. "His idiocy is spreading." Her muted voice came out the curtain of red hair that draped over her. Akino fought off the laugh building in her as she gathered up the dishes from lunch and started back toward the clubroom kitchenette. Once she came back, Rias was flipping through paperwork sent by her father to complete, stopping only to look up at Akino, who had a knowing grin on her face. "You don't have to say anything," the redhead said with a roll of her eyes. "I wasn't going to." Akino chuckled. "Yes, you were. You were going to say something about how he gets to me or something," Rias shot back. "Oh, I would never presume that a younger boy would have such power over a lady such as yourself, Rias," Akino giggled out. "You are supposed to support and uplift me as a queen, you know," Rias said. I support your decision to totally give in to the demands of a young boy. Good for you," Akino said again, twisting it into an innuendo. Rias didn't respond, instead dropping her head onto her desk, part of her wondering what she did to deserve such an insubordinate peerage. Later that evening, Naruto was in no better mood than he had been earlier in the day. He was happy at least one of his comrades was helping him in the search for Asia, but Koa was a sizable place, and the supernatural, no matter the faction, were all very skilled at hiding their presence, even from one another. Now though Rias was calling both himself and Kaneko back for some reason, and it pissed him off as it took more time away from trying to find someone that for all he knew was already dead. He couldn't help but blame himself. He had been selfish wanting to say goodbye in person when he could have just had his clones escort her to the church. She would have been with others from her own faction then, and in safer hands he was sure. Now, not only was she taken, but she was plucked right out of his own house. Hurt his friend and Naruto would be pissed at you. He might even take that anger out on you. This was different though. Whether because of how completely innocent Asia was, the very fast bond they had formed, or because she had been essentially under his protection, Naruto was ready to burn the fallen and whatever hole they were hiding into ash. That was actually being merciful with the chillingly dark thoughts that had filtered through his head over the last few days. So thanks to a combination of his anger at his situation and growing desire to get his hands on those responsible, Naruto was ready to blow. Still, he reeled himself in as best he could. The whole peerage was here, well excluding Gasper of course. They were gathered outside a rundown warehouse, once more on the outskirts of Ko. Even out here in the street, Naruto and Kaneko could smell the blood and filth from the murdered humans inside. This stray, Visser, had recently moved into the area and already had racked up a kill count approaching the double digits. She was clearly off the deep end and needed to be handled. However, she was also unusually weak even for a single pawn reincarnated devil. Unlike the more dangerous strays that killed members of their peerages to escape, Visser had just decided to never return from a contract and gone her own way. Initially, the underworld had practically ignored her leaving. She was weak, didn't seem to be causing any problems, and was simply not worth the effort. That changed over the last few weeks as she had begun cutting a path through the human population in this part of Japan, eventually landing herself in the shared Gremory Citri territory of Ko. It was a mistake she wouldn't live to regret. Nearby, Rias had begun to explain the roles of her new members to them. They listened raptly, or at least the Kendo girls did. Aika had a rough understanding already, and the boys as usual were too busy ogling the redhead as she spoke. She really needed to work on controlling her body movement when she spoke if she wanted the three idiots to retain anything she taught them. Now, as I said, each member of the peerage takes the place of a chess piece. As our rooks, Naruto and Kaneko will begin by giving us entry. she explained. The pair of rooks nodded to one another and smashed open the door to the warehouse with a pair of punches. The metal door practically exploded off of its hinges and sailed into the darkness of the building while Kiba joined Naruto and Kaneko as they moved into the room. As you can see, the rooks are given boosts to strength and endurance. This makes them excellent for close quarters combat. Rias continued as the pawns. Even Aika looked surprised at the ease Naruto and Kaneko removed such a massive steel door. Naruto briefly froze as the sight of a family of 4 entered his view. 2 little girls and a woman, likely their mother, lay dead, directly behind the corpse of a man who appeared to have tried to shield them from something. If he hadn't been pissed already, Naruto would likely have been able to better control himself. Instead, this was more of the icing on his cake of a shitty week. Issei bitch, get out here and die! He screamed out into the darkness, surprising his peerage mates, and causing Rias to hiss in anger at her rook. Oh my, so loud. So foolish. You stink terribly too, a voice called back. I can't wait to make you smell just like these ones here. You'll fit right in. The origin of the voice came into sight, causing the pervs to grin at the sight of her nude upper body, until she came fully into the light. While her upper half was that of a young, nude woman, her lower half was monstrous, and soon her face took on more monster-like characteristics as her smile grew too wide for a human face. Her teeth peeked through her stretched lips, showing needle-like points that glinted in the dim light despite being more yellow than white. Yes, I think she started once more only to be silenced as a fist slammed into her body, doubling her over. The fight, if it could be called that, was very short. Naruto slammed into Visser without mercy. He didn't use any of his typical shinobi grace, or hard-earned strategic mindset that Rias and the others had come to expect with him. Just anger and strength. It wasn't like he needed anything else anyway. Visser really had been a weak piece only worth the effort to put down because of her murders of innocent humans. The peerage grew more and more uncomfortable as the blonde brought his fists down into the dying stray, again and again. The woman hadn't even screamed out during the ordeal, gurgling faintly for a time, before the only sounds was the wet popping of the rook's fists as he kept beating on her. Naruto, that's enough, Rias shouted, bringing him out of his brief stupor. At first he rounded to shout at Rias only to freeze when seeing the group before him. The looks in their eyes held him there. The absolute disgust and fear from new members, and shock and again fear from Kaneko and Kiba. Even Akino held a disapproving look on her face, though at least for her he could imagine it wasn't the act itself that bothered her, but the difference in his usual demeanor. The worst though was Rias. She looked trapped between fear, anger, and grief from how he was acting, and seeing angry tears built up in her eyes hit him like a bucket of cold water. She noticed his change immediately. As the boy stood and stumbled off the ruined corpse of Visser, Naruto stammered out an apology to Rias and the others. Rias surprised him though. Instead of shouting at him or trying to lecture him as she had done all week, she instead grabbed hold of him and teleported the two back to her home. Once there, she pushed him into a chair and disappeared briefly into the kitchen before returning with a couple of his favorite sodas and sat down beside him. They were silent for what felt like hours. They had long finished off their drinks and simply sat by one another.